On behalf of the Board of Homeschoolers of Maine, it's my joy to welcome you to this 2021 virtual Capitol Day. We'd love to be able to be there in person. We just want to, again, thank you for being here. We want to thank Ed and Kathy for the 30 years that they've dedicated to the homeschool freedoms. And we want to thank all the leaders that helped make today possible. There's a lot that went into it, and we just want you to know how grateful we are. We believe you're going to be blessed today. We believe that you're going to be challenged as well as entertained and encouraged. Anytime that we come together for these types of things, we know good things come of it. So we're glad that you're here. We're glad that you're homeschooling. We're hoping that this will be a great benefit to you. And again, we're thankful for the community that we have and can come together for. Again, a lot of people worked hard today or leading up to today. And we hope that you'll take time to give them thanks for everything that's come together. We have not only the presenters, but we recognize the work that went behind putting it all together. Today, I just simply wanted to open up with just a quick word of encouragement and prayer. Today is in itself is a symbol as we celebrate our capital, as we celebrate our democracy, as we celebrate our freedom to be able to homeschool. Symbolism impacts us every day. Road signs, logos, emojis, for crying out loud, all employ symbolism, evoking ideas and moods. You know, as we consider these things, words, people, markings, locations, and even abstract ideas represent something well beyond their literal meaning. St. Augustine once said that symbols are powerful because they are visible signs of invisible realities. Today, the sight or mention of our state capital, a governor of our past or present, a flag, a general, such as Chamberlain, a town name, a historical event will have the potential to raise strong emotions of pride, regret, honor, a sense of belonging, anger, hope, shame, or maybe courage. You know, from today's actually the word courage. And the word courage is taken from the Latin word that at the heart of it means the heart, the seat of the emotions, hence spirit or temperament, a state of or frame of mind. Today's meaning, we usually mean valor or a quality of mind which enables one to meet danger or trouble without fear. But in the Middle English, it actually had a broader meaning what is in one's mind or thoughts. Hence, bravery, or also could be wrath, pride, confidence, any sort of inclination. Sometimes symbols can show us what's in our heart. It may be why the Lord told Joshua to be strong and of good courage. Courage is our theme again today, regardless of the emotions that certain images or people or ideas bring up to you, and they will be different for everyone. The symbol of our flag, our Capitol building, our history has, in my mind, one unifying meaning for all of us. It's our flag. It's our capital. It's our history. We may be on totally different ends of the spectrum, but we're all Mainers. We're all homeschoolers. May we have the courage to continue to fight for what we believe in. Stand for freedom, not burn bridges, reach across the aisle, not shut each other out, to keep loving and giving despite our differences. There's a story of a master weaver. He was possibly the best in the world, very well known. His granddaughter wanted to help him out, but she was not allowed to until her 7th birthday. At her 7th birthday, her grandfather presented her with a set of her own needles. He began work at teaching her some just basic techniques. And then the day came where they sat down together and began to work on a project together. It didn't take very long for the grandfather to recognize that not one stitch that she made was correct. And yet, the mastery that this older gentleman had on this skill of the skills that he had, the mastery he had over weaving, he was able to not change what she did, but incorporate what she did into the overall project, and it became a thing of beauty. It reminds me of God being able to make all things work together for good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So as we continue on in this history, in this journey, in this collective walk together in both homeschooling and politics, I'd just like to encourage you that we would do it with a good courage and believing God to work something beautiful, even in the midst of some of our messes. So today, I hope that today will be a huge blessing to you. I know that you're going to see many symbols, both of our capital, of individuals from history, speaking of events, certain aspects of our Bill of Rights, certain things of history that are going to bring back memories, that are going to raise up memories, that are going to raise up emotions. And I hope that today it'll be those of pride, encouragement, valor, so that we can continue together arm in arm. Amen. I'd like to pray over this time as we get going. Father, we just praise you this morning. We thank you for your presence. And we thank you, Lord, for the symbols that you have given us that raise up the emotions of oneness with you, the cross. We thank you for our capital and the nation that we have the privilege of belonging to. We thank you for this great state of Maine. And we thank you that freedoms that we have because of the price that so many went before us have paid. We thank you for the freedom to homeschool. And we ask your grace to be able to see homeschooling remain a free part of our system. We thank you, Lord, for each family that's represented here this morning. And we ask your grace, your love, your care to be profoundly seen in their experience going forward in Jesus' name. We pray, Lord, for homeschoolers of Maine. And we thank you for continuing to undergird this organization, not just the organization of itself, but the people that make it up with strength, with courage, with perseverance to continue on. And we thank you, Lord, that you're able to take everything that is going on today and somehow weave it into something beautiful. And we just put our trust in you. We ask your blessing upon the events of today and ask that you'd use them to help us to continue on with fresh encouragement, with fresh comfort, as we know that we are following you. Lord, today we thank you for each one who will be presenting. We thank you, Lord, for your goodness seen in and through them. Lord, we ask your favor on our government, on all of its officials, from our governor to our legislature. We thank you, Lord, for those who are lobbying, those who are fighting for the causes that are just and righteous. And we thank you, Lord, for leading them. We ask, Lord, your intervention into all aspects of our government. So today we place all things in our trust in you. And we pray as you have asked us to pray, our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom and the glory and the power forevermore. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God bless you. We pray that today is a super blessing for you. We encourage you to use the chat and bring up questions. We want you to know that we're here for you as an organization, individually, and otherwise. We want you to know that we're in this together, and we say God bless you.
Good morning, everyone. We're the Hurd family, and please join us in saying the pledges to the United States flag, the Christian flag, and the Bible. Ready, boys? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the Christian flag and to the Savior for whose kingdom it stands, one Savior, crucified, risen, and coming again with life and liberty for all who believe. And I pledge allegiance to the Bible, God's holy word. I will make it a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Its words will I hide in my heart, that I might not sin against God. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Laurel Libby and I'm state representative from District 64, which is part of Auburn and all of Minot, and I'm so glad to be coming before you guys on this special day. Thanks so much for including me. I am, in addition to being a state representative, I am a wife and mom and a nurse and small business owner. And maybe more importantly, I am a homeschool graduate myself. So I have a special appreciation for the hard work that you've invested into the last year of your education, whether you are the teacher or student. Kudos to you for a job well done over the past year. I hear that courage is the topic of the day, and I want to read a quote by Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill said that courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. One of my favorite parts of my job as state representative is that we have public hearings on all the bills that come before the state legislature. So in my committee, the Judiciary Committee, we have about 170 bills this session. And we hear from all kinds of folks. We hear from lobbyists, lots and lots of lobbyists who are advocating on behalf of their clients. But we also hear from lots of Maine residents. And that is my favorite part of public hearings, because you're hearing from Maine residents who have had the courage to stand up and speak about a bill that they feel passionately about, an issue that they really care about. And I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to participate in the legislative process, but it can be really kind of daunting. The first time that I ever testified or started writing to my legislators, it was really, really intimidating. I didn't know the process at all. And so it's really fun to be on the other side of it and to see Maine people speaking with courage to the things that they care about. So that's what I have to say about courage. If you ever have questions about how to participate in the legislative process, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to educate folks on how they can be more involved in our state. And again, congratulations on a job well done this last year. Enjoy your summer break, unless you're year-round. Then enjoy the next phase of your education.
Hi, I'm Chris Johansson. I am your state legislator. I represent the 18 organized towns between Bridgewater and Sherman. A little about myself. I did a hitch from the U.S. Marines at the end of the Vietnam War and then went into law enforcement. I would like to talk to you today about courage. Courage is the ability to move when you see something that needs to be done, either an emergency, a dire emergency, or one that you can see coming out. The situation that we're in today with our world, it's going to take a lot of courage on your part, and a lot of you are going to have to step up and do something. Keep in mind, we've got 2 legislators from Aroostook County that are in their 20s, both of them elected at about 22 years old. You can do this, but take a stand. That there's crowds of people around you waiting and looking for somebody to make the move, to step forward, and then they'll follow you. But please have the courage to move and do something. If you see it needs to be done, get up and do it. Thank you very much. Congratulations. It's another big step in your world. So congratulations and good luck, kids.
Hi, I'm Representative Heidi Sampson, and I represent the people of House District 21. That's Alfred, Limerick, Shapley, Newfield, and Parsonsfield. I am a fellow homeschooler, homeschooled for almost 25 years. All of my kids have graduated. And now I'm here at the State House, as you can see. And I want to challenge you and encourage you all with some things that are very dear to my heart. And that is, first of all, serving the people. And second of all, doing it with courage and boldness. And in Joshua 1:9, the Lord speaks to us, he challenges us, and he says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And Joshua is such a great example of a servant of the people. And this is something I want you to think about, because in Matthew it says, the greatest among you shall be your servant. But how do you serve people? Well, you need to do your homework. You need to know truth. Seek truth, go to the bedrock, and stand on that truth. And then speak that truth. And sometimes you have to speak truth to power. And that can be scary, but you do it with kindness. You're always gracious and respectful of that individual. And yes, you can stand and you can be the only one speaking that truth. Keep speaking that truth, because you are not alone. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Creator of the universe has put you here for such a time as this, and He is with you, even if you see no one around you. Be of courage. Do bold things. Be brave for God, and God bless you.
Hi, I'm State Senator Stacey Guerin, urging you to take courage. Many years ago, when I was a homeschooling mother, I was approached about running for the Maine House of Representatives. I wondered if people would support someone with my background, but after praying about it, I decided to go for it. I was elected and served 8 years in the Maine House, and I am now in my second term in the Maine Senate. It's amazing what you can do when you step forward with courage. I urge you to find your place in the world and go for it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Justin Fecto, and I'm a state representative from Augusta. I am so proud of our homeschoolers here in Maine. You all have done a magnificent job, especially in this last year when there have been challenges upon challenges, and you guys have really risen to the occasion, and I'm so proud of you. I've been asked to speak to you a little bit about courage today. And my favorite type of courage is community courage. Community courage can be scary. Kind of feels like you have knots in your stomach sometimes. But community courage, for me, is when you notice something in your town, city, or state, or nation that's unjust, and that people or a situation is outnumbered even when they're right. And that's community courage, is when you stand up and you let people know that you're with them, because you're going to correct the injustice, and you work to do that. Sometimes it's scary, but we need our courageous homeschoolers to continue learning and growing, and I'm so proud of each and every one of you. Have a wonderful year and a wonderful summer.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Capitol Day rally. I'm excited about this and feeling encouraged. My name is Angela Hurd, and I'm the advertising coordinator for Homeschoolers of Maine, and I'll be hosting this event. Again, our theme is courage, and we have some amazing speakers lined up to tell us their thoughts about courage, especially during the times that we're living in. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention a few things about this week is Home Education Week. And right now we have a huge used curriculum sale going on to celebrate that. We have 500 items. And if you go to the website, you can get to that sale and you can bid or you can directly purchase items, books, curriculum. It's a great time to stock up for next year. If you notice on the website, if you go down on the right, you'll see that there is a events, upcoming events, it will say, and you can click right there to get to the sale, right on the first page of the website. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you should check out our sponsors. They're on the Capitol Day page. They've got some amazing things to share with you. We're very grateful that they're sponsoring this event. And another thing I wanted to mention, which I really don't need to, because I see that all of you are muted, but I just was going to remind people to stay muted just during the parts where people are speaking. There will be some question and answer times where you'll want to unmute and speak. But while people are speaking, it's nice to stay muted. I'm excited to introduce our first speaker. His name is Jeremiah Lorig. He's the Deputy Director of Generation Joshua, and he travels the US. He equips students by presenting them with conservative principles and introducing them to conservative politics. He's been in over 100 campaigns in the last 10 years. And I highly recommend that you check out Generation Joshua. They're one of our sponsors. You can get to their site right through ours. And Jeremiah will be speaking to us about advocacy and how we can impact government. And after he speaks, we have a short video to show you about I Govern, which is through Generation Joshua. It's a leadership camp, which is very neat and something you should check out. Thank you so much, Jeremiah, for being with us today. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here with all of you today. I wish it was in person, and I personally struggle with these like Zoom meetings and online venues and all that kind of stuff. So if you are so kind, I would love you all to keep the chat box going crazy. I love interactive audiences. If you want to turn your video cameras on and like wave or you know, whatever, I love that. That'll make me feel a lot more comfortable. Just knowing that I'm talking to real people, because that's what this is all about. That's what I love about community events like this, is when we as homeschoolers, as this family can come together and do something important. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to ask you to participate a little bit in the chat box, and I want to hear from you. What are some examples of courage, people, heroes that you can think of that have demonstrated courage, whether in history, in your life? This could be fictional. It can be one of the martyrs of the early church. It can be Jim Elliot. It can be George Washington. It can be Frodo. Just throw in the chat box. Make sure you hit to everyone so that I can see your answer. But I would love to see some examples. Firefighter, your husband. That's so awesome. Served our country in the Navy. That's one example. What are some other examples of courage? And I don't need to call on you. You don't need to raise your hand. Just feel free to throw some examples. Joshua Chamberlain, hero from Maine, outstanding. The Hardy Boys, yes, the Hardy Boys were the first books that got me reading when I was young. Abraham Lincoln, serving his country, giving his life that people could be free. Grandfather served, and uncle who served in the Marine Corps. Winston Churchill, iconic. George Washington Carver. What an inspiration. Joan of Arc. Yes. You know, battle going on for 9 months. And then in 9 days, she shows up, and 9 days later they win, right? They're losing for 9 months, and then they win. Courage demonstrated. Nate Saint gave his life to share the gospel. I love this. Yes. And of course, Jesus giving all for us. What examples. I love it. All right, so I'm thinking of courage, and what does it take to be courageous? And I think of you guys, and I think of me when I first started working at HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. My first job at HSLDA was to be a lobbyist. And as a lobbyist, people are like, lobbyists don't have a good reputation, in case you haven't noticed. Lobbyists, lawyers, and HSLDA is made up of lobbyists and lawyers, but we're the good ones, right? We're not sitting here trying to manipulate the system. We're trying to be a voice for people. But lobbyists and lawyers, you know, we think of people like them. Their job is to stand up and speak in court and all that kind of stuff. But we're asking you guys to take courage in your lives today and in these unsteady times and do something, right? It's not just enough for us to get together here and, be encouraged to be brave at home. We want to turn that courage into something. And I want to give you some confidence and some tools for how you can be courageous in your context, and especially when it comes to impacting your government and making a difference in the state capitol. So, how can you have the courage to speak to elected officials? Let me give you some practical steps so you can have confidence to act in courage. So I work with Generation Joshua. So we're a division of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And I feel like a bit of my thunder was stolen when I am sitting here listening to these great examples of leaders already. And when Representative Heidi Sampson was speaking, she started quoting from Joshua. From scripture, and it says, "Be strong and courageous." That's the charge in that passage, and she was hitting the nail on the head there. We need to be strong and courageous, but how can we do that? How can we do that in our context? So that's what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to go back to the 90s. So this story is now almost 3 decades old, but I want to start there because it's a pivotal start for several things. One, it's a start of homeschool, the homeschoolers as a acknowledged presence in the political world. So we're going to go back to the 90s to HR 6. The famous Battle of HR 6. If you were homeschooling in the 90s, you knew about this. Even if you weren't homeschooling in the 90s, many people heard about it. It was the moment where homeschoolers broke through. And let me kind of set the stage, because I know many of you aren't familiar with it, or it's been a while since you've heard the story. So back in the 90s, and some of you weren't even born then, right? I see a lot of young folks, which makes me super excited for the future, right? That's what this is all about. But so in the 90s, there was homeschooling was a thing. There were many homeschoolers out there, but it wasn't really thought of in terms of the national stage. It wasn't really thought of in terms of politics, and it wasn't mentioned hardly ever in legislation or speeches or anything like that. Well, there was a congressman from California who wanted to do some educational reforms, and his name was George. And George went to Congress and he wrote a bill. It was called HR 6, and it was going to do all kinds of things. It was 700 pages long. It spent about $7 billion a year. So it was a big bill. And most people were like, okay, it's typical congressional stuff. Very few people were paying super close attention. But there was a homeschool mom, and I think there's some homeschool moms in the audience. I see a couple of you smiling like, yep, that's me. There are a few homeschool moms in the audience. There was a homeschool mom who, I don't know why, this is like, I'm a nerd. I love literature. I love art, that I definitely would, and I love politics. So I'm a nerd, but she must have taken it to a whole new level because she decided to read that 700-page bill. And so she was reading through that bill, and she found something that concerned her. She saw that there was a section that said that every teacher in the United States should be certified to teach in every area that they taught. And she thought, wait a second, most homeschool moms are not certified in math and in English and in history and in physical education and in preschool reading and in every single area that they teach. And there's no exception here. It doesn't say all public school teachers. It doesn't say all private school teachers. It doesn't say all public and private school teachers. It says every teacher in the United States needs to be certified in every area that they teach. And so she was concerned. She said, does this apply to me? So she picked up the phone. So first off, she was brave enough to read. So we're talking about a woman with courage here. She was brave enough to read a 700-page bill. And then second, she was brave enough to say, I'm not sure, but I think I should call somebody. So she called HSLDA. She called the Homeschool Legal Defense Association and said, hey, I'm reading through this bill, HR 6, and this is what I read. What do you guys think? And as soon as our team saw that, they're like, oh, wow, this is a game changer. What can we do with this? Or what do we need to do with this? And at the time, remember, we're talking in the 90s, there weren't email blasts, there weren't anything. What they had is they had faxes and they had phones. They actually had to physically start calling people, and they set up phone chains where they would call people and ask them to call people and ask them to call people. That's that, like they couldn't just post on a website and send out a link and say, everybody go to this link and read this article. They had to actually call people. And so they started calling homeschool moms, homeschool dads, homeschool students all across the country. And they said, hey, this is important. We need you to call Congress yourself and then talk to your friends and have them call Congress. And we were doing the same thing. We started talking with our allies. So we started talking with organizations like Homeschoolers of Maine, and we started talking to other ministries that were out doing stuff. We talked to people on the radio. We talked to people on TV. We did everything we could to get the word out there. And by the end of it, literally millions of people like you called Congress. To that point, there had never been that many calls into Washington, D.C. in all of history. That campaign produced so many calls that the switchboard, the entire phone system in the Capitol collapsed. It did not work. They couldn't use their intercoms because their intercoms were connected to the same system as their phone lines. And so they couldn't call members of Congress and say, hey, it's time to vote. like everything started to grind to a halt in Washington, D.C. And they had never experienced that. They had never experienced a turnout like that. And obviously it was homeschoolers and then all the friends. You guys, if this happened today, it wouldn't be just all the homeschoolers getting up and calling. It would be you and getting your family and your friends and even maybe some of your enemies being like, hey, I know we don't agree on everything, but please call Washington, D.C. right now. You know, that kind of thing. Congress was so overwhelmed, they were like, who do we call to stop this? What can we do to stop this? And so the leader of the House of Representatives started asking around, like, what's going on? What's wrong? And they're talking to people and they're like, okay, we know that there's a problem with HR 6. What do we do? They called HSLDA and HSLDA, we had all our phones going. So it's a miracle that he got through because we were making all of our calls out. And there was a phone that was ringing in an abandoned office. And a homeschool girl who was in her teens, she was about, I think, 15. She was walking by when that office when it rang, and she was like, "Oh, I should probably answer that." So she picked up the phone. So the heroes of this story, like HSLDA is doing our part, but the heroes of this story are the mom who's reading the bill and the teenage homeschool girl who picks up the phone. She picks up the phone and she's like, "Hello." And it's like, yes, this is from the House leadership. We want to talk to somebody to see how we can get these phone calls to stop. She's like, one moment, please. she runs and gets her dad who works here. And it's like, hey, who do we talk to? And they got it to the right people. In the end, the leadership said, okay, we got to fix this. Everybody, we're going to fix this. Okay, everybody, we're going to fix this. They wrote an amendment that said this doesn't apply to homeschoolers, basically. And they bring it down to the floor of the House of Representatives and they say, all right, everybody, you better vote for this because if you don't, the homeschoolers will not stop calling. And in the end, that provision that would have effectively outlawed homeschooling across the United States in that early stage failed, with every single member of the House of Representatives voting against it and for the amendment, except for George, the member of Congress who wrote the original bill. And even as he voted for it, his argument was, this doesn't apply to homeschoolers anyway. So even the one person who voted for it was saying, nope, we're not gonna hurt the homeschoolers. This is too scary. So the reason I tell this story is because the heroes are multiple. They're people who were courageous. The teenage girl who was brave enough to pick up the phone when it was ringing, not knowing who was going to be on the other end of the line. The homeschool mom who was like, I'm not an expert in legislation, but I'm willing to read the 700-page bill for who knows what reason. And then to call HSLDA. So there are profiles of courage demonstrated right there. But the other reason I tell the story is because the impact of that story still echoes down to us almost, what are we talking? Almost 30 years later, 25 years later. We've got when I started working at HSLDA, I was going into Congress, meeting different members of the people on Capitol Hill, members of Congress, whatever, whoever would meet with me to talk about the wonders of the amazingness of homeschooling. Well, as I would go around, I would meet plenty of people who were too young to remember, but I also would meet regularly the people who were around that day, around that week. And they would tell me, oh, you're with the homeschoolers. We don't make the homeschoolers angry around here. We just don't do that. So it still has an impact of memory there. But even more interesting to me is how that story continues. And this is where you guys come in today. One of the things that's really important is homeschoolers not just paying attention to the world around them, but engaging it, to be courageous, to stand up and say, I am willing to make a difference. And so what I think of when I think of homeschoolers making a difference, I think of people like you who decide that I'm going to participate in a Capitol Day. I'm going to go out of my way. I'm going to carve time out of my schedule and go and meet elected officials so that they can put a face to the idea of homeschooling, so they can be held accountable when they're thinking about regulating homeschooling, that they're going to think of you. And this is super, super important, because what ends up happening is relationships are built. So let me go back to George. Remember Congressman George from California? His name is George Miller, but I like saying George because it's easy to remember. George, Congressman George, Representative Miller, from California. He decided he started out in the 90s, just writing legislation on education. Well, because he was involved and he stayed around in the process, he rose in the ranks. And so years pass and he gets higher and higher in the system until he becomes the chairman of the Education Committee for the United States House of Representatives. He becomes the #1 policymaker for the United States of America in terms of education on the national level. I am a young, fresh out of college student. I start working at HSLDA doing lobbying, and we can't do it all ourselves. It was me and a friend of mine named Will. We were working hard in the halls of Congress, but we couldn't do it all ourselves. We needed help. So we reached out. We said, hey, we need some homeschoolers, some homeschool moms, homeschool teens, homeschool dads. We need your guys to show up. And so we would invite them down a couple times a year to just come to Washington, D.C. and go and meet members of Congress and build relationships when we couldn't, because there were only 2 of us, and there's 535 members of Congress, and that's just Congress, and we have the executive branch. There's a lot. So what we do is we bring them in and we would introduce them to these homeschool moms. And they were mostly people from the DC area, but there was one family that decided to drive. They would drive 3.5 hours from Pennsylvania to Washington, DC a couple times a year to do this for us. Talk about bravery, right? And they were just a regular homeschool family that heard the call. They heard that we needed help. And they had the courage to say, okay, what can we do? And we trained them. We told them what they could do. And they would go in and they would meet with George. They'd meet with Chairman Miller now. And they would just bring him cookies. They would, when they couldn't meet with him, they'd meet with his staff. They became fixtures in the regular work, office where people knew who they were when they would stop by. George would recognize them and say, hey guys, how's it going? How's the kids? How's homeschooling going? You know, all that kind of stuff. Well, one day there was a bill that came up in the House of Representatives, and it was going to go through Chairman Miller's committee. And we needed that bill to be changed because it was going to put some unnecessary regulations and requirements on homeschoolers all around the country. And we're like, homeschool moms don't need to be filling out more paperwork for the federal government. They can be spending their time with their kids, teaching their kids. That's where they need to be spending their time, not doing bureaucratic paperwork. So we call the family in Pennsylvania and say, hey, are you willing to drive 7 hours? 3 hours here, three and a half hours here, 3.5 hours back, come to Washington, D.C. We would love to have your help because you have a relationship with him that we do not. They came down, we gave them a packet of materials. We explained the issue. We said, this is what we need you to do. They go into his office, they meet with him, they give him some cookies, they tell some jokes, they reminisce for a minute, and then they say, hey, here's a problem. Can you help us? And even though he was the enemy in the 90s, regular homeschoolers built a relationship with him to the point where he said, okay, thank you. I will look at this and I will do what I can to help you because I know you. I know you. So that's what happened. He got the information, he made the change, and it was as simple as that. We didn't have to activate 2 million phone calls into Washington, D.C. Instead, we had one homeschool family that was willing to pick up and drive for 7 hours to capitalize on the relationship that they built. So how does this apply to you? What I am asking you all to do is to work with the homeschoolers of Maine to build relationships with legislators. To build those relationships with legislators so that they can see the face of homeschoolers. Obviously, HSLDA, we do our part to support what you are doing there. And Homeschoolers of Maine is a wonderful organization that's doing their part, but we are stronger when we all work together. Just like in the 90s. Only now we don't need to make a phone tree and call our neighbors and ask our neighbors to do something. Instead, what we can do is we can get together and build direct relationships with the legislators. We don't need to mobilize 2 million phone calls if we can mobilize you. Get your kids, dress them up, walk down to the Capitol in your Capitol clothes and meet the legislators. Make it a field trip. Have fun. Get your picture taken with them. They always love getting pictures taken with kids. Spend that time. Build the relationship. You don't have to ask for anything. You just need to be there. But when the time comes, that is when the difference will be made. And one thing I didn't mention, not only was George the enemy in the 90s, but he was not of a political party that generally works with homeschoolers. He was known for working with the teachers' unions. He was not an easy person to work with, but relationships matter. And when that family was willing to drive down to Washington, D.C. and meet with him, he took the time because they had built a relationship with him and he recognized that relationship. They weren't his constituents. They weren't even from his state, but he saw them, he met with them, and he knew who they were. And he didn't want to hurt that family who he had met and built that relationship with. So that's what I'm asking you all to do. So practical tools. How do you build a relationship with a legislator? I have what I call the 3-meeting rule. The 3-meeting rule, and then I'll take questions. But the 3-meeting rule starts with the first time you meet a legislator, you introduce yourself. And I say, and you can find them in any number of places. Obviously, the easy places to find them are their offices. You can just ask to have a meeting, schedule a field trip, that kind of stuff. But other places, they all run for office. So they're all doing campaign events. So you'll find them at, party meetings. You'll find them at parades. You'll find them at fairs. You can find elected officials. Another place you can find them is at libraries and grand openings and stuff. Just look for them, and you get on their email list, call them up and say, hey, is there a convenient time, whatever it takes. But the first time you meet them, the first thing you do is you introduce yourself and you tie it into something that they can tag you with. So obviously, when we're talking about homeschooling is the easy thing. So I would say, hi, George, or Congressman Miller, my name's Jeremiah, and I'm a homeschooler. So now he's met me, he has a tag for what it is, homeschooling, and my name. And then I just thank them. I just say something nice, like, thank you for being willing to serve your community. Even if I disagree with them on everything that they're doing, I can say, thank you for having a heart of public service. I just want it to be a warm interaction. I'm not asking them for anything at this point. I'm just introducing myself. This is meeting number 1. Introduce yourself, give them something to remember, AKA homeschooling, and thank them for something. That's meeting number 1. Meeting number 2, reintroduce yourself. Now, they will probably not remember you. Remember, these people, they meet a million people all the time. And even if they do kind of vaguely remember you, they will not remember your name, more than likely. Some people do, but it's like don't assume that. Just go with. So what I do is I reintroduce myself. Hey, George, or hey, Congressman Miller. I don't know if you remember me, so I'm reminding them that they've met me before, even though they won't remember. I don't know if you remember me, but I saw you at the library. So yeah, hi, Congressman George. My name's Jeremiah. I don't know if you remember me. I saw you at the library and wanted to say hello. They will always, I have never met, so even if they don't remember you, politicians, it's like in their blood. They always say, of course I remember you, Jeremiah. Because I gave them the tool to say that, because I told them that they met me at the library and my name, right? So if I just walked up to them and said, hey, remember me? They'd be like, trying, they'd be reaching, they don't have anything they can tag. But I walked up to them and said, hey, Congressman Miller, I don't know if you remember me. My name's Jeremiah. I met you at the library. I get all that out as fast as I can. And then they're like, of course I remember you, Jeremiah. It's good to see you again. Literally every single time. I've never had a politician not remember me when I give them the cheat sheet. I help them cheat. And then at that point, in the conversation, I bring up homeschooling again. So remember, I'm echoing back to the original conversation. I'm just bringing up homeschooling again. And then I ask them a question about something related to homeschooling, like, hey, do you work with a lot of homeschoolers, or do you have any family or friends that homeschool? Something like that. Just to underline the homeschool connection again. So remember, the first time you meet them, you just introduce yourself and tie it to something like homeschooling, and then thank them for whatever. Second time, reintroduce yourself, remind them of where they met you last time, and ask them a question about the thing you tied yourself to, AKA homeschooling. So that's meeting number 2. So now, like, they've got it in their head, I remember Jeremiah, right? Third meeting. You do the same thing you did in the second meeting. Remind them of your name and give them some context, like homeschooling. So and by the third meeting, you'll be surprised, but by this time, most elected officials will actually remember you. They may not remember your name, they may not remember all the details, but if you give them enough, they'll probably remember your face by the third time. And so now you have gone from being a random citizen, which is where you started, to being a valued member of the community. A valued member of the community. In their minds, you have gone from being just an average Joe on the street to being like, oh, this person gets around. I've now seen them 3 times. That's so they must be big. They must be important. You know, they're everywhere I am. You know, like those are the types of things they're thinking. And as long as you haven't put off crazy vibes, you're you're going to be in good shape. And notice, we haven't given them a chance to think of you as crazy yet, because you're just talking to them about homeschooling. You're thanking them for their service. You ask them a question about how many homeschoolers they know, or not, if they know any, if their family or friends homeschool. You know, you're asking just kind questions. But now now that you're a valued member of the community, now you have a voice. When you ask them to do something, they are 100 times more likely to listen. They are likely to listen to what you have to say at that point. So you have just upgraded yourself from average Joe to valued member of the community, and you are equipped to be like that family from Pennsylvania who drove down to Washington, D.C. to meet with George and say, hey, would you not let this pass? Would you please make this amendment? Would you protect homeschooling? Because this will affect me and my kids. So that's some tips to give you some practical steps to have some confidence, to add that to your courage so that you can act. Are there any questions? Any questions from you guys? Feel free to throw them in the chat or unmute your mic. I'm pretty chill. So otherwise, I will hand it back to Angela. I'm not seeing any hands raised. All right. Oh wait, here's a question. From Jessica. Yeah, oh, I'm glad you think it's easy to remember. I try to keep it simple. I'm used to teaching high schoolers. So with Generation Joshua, you know, our mission is to equip high schoolers to be citizens. So we'll show you the video about our summer program that does that. But I try to make it memorable because I work with teens. All righty. So do I hand it back to Angela? Angela, are you going to take it over?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jeremiah. This was very informative. And I think a lot of people here, I can see on their faces, feel the same way. We've got some tools to use. Thank you so much. Oh, I see a question here that says, are there any other keys to building relationships with officials? Do you want to take that, Jeremiah?
Sure. I'll just briefly give some practical tips. One is dress the part. When you're going to the Capitol, make it like your Sunday best. You know, go put your best foot forward. Bring your kids too. Like a lot of people think, oh, I need to be a professional. Don't go as a professional. Go as a homeschool mom, but who on your more put together day, right? So that's what you're looking for is regular homeschool mom, but a little on the put together side of things. Don't bring your kids in their like in their like run around in the creek clothes. Bring them in their nicer clothes. So you know, I would advise against you know, workout shorts and t-shirts. I mean, I grew up in Colorado, so jeans and a t-shirt was my everyday wear. But when going to the Capitol, that's what you might still wear jeans, but button-up shirt instead. You know, that kind of thing. So put your best foot forward, and then look for those conversational things. My most effective question was, do you know any homeschoolers? And then they're like, oh yeah, my sister-in-law homeschools their kids, or my daughter's ballet class, there was a homeschooler in there who was so cool. And then focus on the positive relationships there. So those are some good tips. I'll leave David, I'll leave the actual specific lobbying points to Homeschoolers of Maine. They've got the handle on all that. But thank you all for your time. I really love spending this half hour with you. It's been super encouraging for me to have such a great audience, and I hope the rest of your Capitol Day is a smashing success.
Thank you so much, Jeremiah. We'll watch the short video about the iGovern leadership camps through Generation Joshua. Thank you.
So now
You don't have to want to go into politics when you grow up to attend these iGovern leadership camps. Because although you do learn so much about civics and about the election process and about the political process as a whole, you also learn so much about yourself and about how to lead and how to work with people you wouldn't normally work with. My name is Justin Corbin. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and this is my 4th year and 6th iGovern camp. You can't do anything here without working and collaborating with other people. And that's just so important to the culture here at the iGovern leadership camps, but also out in the real world when you can't do things all on your own. Learning to build each other up instead of tearing each other down has just been so important. When I first came to iGovern my freshman year of high school, I thought I was going to be a chiropractor. And after my first couple of nights, I called my mom and said, "Are you gonna be mad at me if I want to become a politician?" Because I mean, they just instilled a passion for politics that I didn't have at all before I came to camps the first time. There's no place, no camp more fun than iGovern. Whether it be the weekly field trips to somewhere in DC, or it be just joking around with the friends that you make, there's no place like the iGovern leadership camps to have fun and fellowship and just grow in your faith at the same time.
Wow, thank you so much. This just looks so inspiring. My boys are interested. Thank you again, Jeremiah. I'm thrilled to introduce our next speaker, who is Carroll Conley from the Christian Civic League. He's the executive director for the Christian Civic League, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit research and education organization dedicated to the preservation of family and Christian values. Carroll's held many administrative and leadership positions throughout the state, and we're very excited to have him here to speak to us about courage today. Thank you so much, Carroll, for being with us. We got to get you unmuted. See it? There.
There we go.
Perfect.
Well, it's an honor to be here, Angela. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I just want to say it was just great watching that video. I just really appreciate, when we talk about the courage this day and age, it's not easy to step up and to engage in the, in the public square, especially those of us that are holding to and trying to be stewards with, the values and the truth that God has given us. Angela, I do want to ask one question. I noticed that video was jumping a little bit while I was watching it. Is my signal okay? It looks like I got a lot of signal here, but are you guys hearing me okay?
It is for me. I hope it is for everyone else. I know all of our internet connections are a bit different, but I'm seeing you well and hearing you well, and it's not skipping for me.
Okay. All right.
Maybe thumbs up from everybody else.
Okay.
We good?
Great.
Great.
Well,
thank you.
If for some reason I'm at home today, like all of you are, and I'm trying to stay away from the barking dogs and things like that. So if I've got my virtual background here. I could make you jealous and let you see the lake behind me here where I live up in Glenburn. But if for some reason, Angela, I'll walk you. For some reason, I could move to a noisier part of the house if we have to get this done, okay? When we talk about courage, it can be a little bit confusing. And I don't want to talk a lot about me this morning. A lot of times people say, wow, Carol, for someone that directs an organization like the Christian Civic League, I bet there are times that it can be pretty intimidating when you talk about really controversial topics like parental rights or abortion or human sexuality. These things today, to have even a civil conversation, let alone with someone calling you names or question your motives. And just like these young men and women that we see are considering going into politics and being advocates, doing public service, it can be daunting. It can be. And so when we talk about courage, obviously it's something very important. And I hope to make the case in the next 15 minutes that God clearly calls us to be courageous. But I don't know if we always know what that means. And so I want to start off with a really basic premise that's not, very impressive, but I want to look at what the dictionary says about courage, and maybe someone else has done that this morning, but I was really kind of disappointed a few years ago when someone asked me to speak about courage, to seeing that some of the newer dictionaries are actually saying that courage is the absence of fear. I don't agree with that. So I went back to the Webster's dictionary, which is probably a little older, a little more classic, and the definition is the mental or moral strength to venture, persevere, withstand danger, fear, or difficulty. Boy, mental or moral strength. Moral strength very much. So thankfully, Webster's hasn't abandoned that idea. But that really, I believe, is an important understanding that courage is not the absence of fear, but it's something that allows us to overcome difficulties, danger, and fear itself. I think another good book to look into is the Bible, into what the Lord says to us as his disciples, as his followers, of what is courage. Now, a lot of us probably would think of Deuteronomy 31:6, where we're told to be strong and courageous, and many times we're told to fear not, and those type of things. So we would think that is bravery or heroism or valor or courage. So the Hebrew word there many times is the word amatz, which shouldn't surprise us when it really means to be bold or to be strong. It even has the idea of being physically alert. Now, I think that's important because being physically alert really goes against the idea that you have this absence of fear, because there's no need to be alert if you don't have something of which you need to be aware that could cause harm or to be dangerous. And then the Greek word, for instance, like in Acts 28, around verse 15, when the Apostle Paul has gathered some of the Jewish leaders that have become Christians in the city of Rome, and he's talking to them, he's gone through all of his appeals, and Paul lets them know that he's about to come to the end of his journey and that he's about to be promoted into heaven because of his execution that's pending. He talks about how he gains courage by being amongst those and fellowshipping with those fellow believers. And clearly, this is an example. That's the Greek word tharsos. And again, it means to be bold. So I think that's kind of our old traditional image or thought of what courage is: being bold, being strong, but certainly not in the capacity of a vacuum or the lack of fear. Now, if that is what comes overcoming fear, then does God call us to be courageous? And I'd ask, if you have your Bibles, turn to the book of Philippians. Again, here's the Apostle Paul writing this to the Philippian Christians, and obviously to us, in chapter 1, in a prison cell. So here is Paul in a prison cell writing to the Philippians, and he says to them at verse 37, and I'm reading out of the NIV, says, "Whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Then whether I come and see you or only hear about you in my absence, I will know that you stand firm in one spirit, contending as one man for the faith of the gospel, without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you. This is a sign to them that they will be destroyed, but that you will be saved, and that by God. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe on him, but to suffer. So here the Apostle Paul, back in verse 27 there, is telling them to make sure that they conduct their lives in a manner that is worthy of the gospel. Now, I know I'm speaking to a lot of folks here that are believers in the Lord Jesus Christ. You've accepted the gift of eternal life that he offers us through Christ. And walking worthy of the gospel doesn't mean we're doing something to attain that salvation. That's not what this is talking about. Walking worthy of the gospel is making sure that your conduct has integrity, that it lines up with the message of the gospel. In other words, your life is persuasive of the gospel, of the truth of the gospel, of the relevance of the message of Jesus Christ. So the Apostle Paul said that our lives are to be conducted in a way that is in line with or consistent with the message of Christ. And when we don't do that, that's called hypocrisy or being a bad testimony, those type of things. But then he said there's a mark of that life. There's two marks. One which is that we act as if we're one man. That's unity. So we stand together. But how do we stand? We stand firm. And again, that goes back to that word courageous, or like tharsos. We stand boldly. We stand courageously. So again, for all you parents and you young people that are listening to this, first of all, the Apostle Paul in Colossians chapter 3 says, do whatever it takes to maintain the unity in the Spirit of Christ. That's a really strong admonition for unity. But we can't have unity without courage. And the Apostle Paul actually, down in verse 30, tells us why it's so important to be ready, because there are going to be difficulties. He says that the very fact that when you speak the truth and you live this life of integrity, you're going to be attacked. There's going to be opposition. Now, the Apostle Paul says you need to overcome that fear, because the Apostle Paul was in jail himself. I don't think any of us long to be in jail, or long to get a beaten, or long to lose our jobs, or long to have our children taken away from us, or all these type of things that are legitimate concerns that we have in our life as advocates for God's truth, and trying to be faithful to that. So the Apostle Paul says, listen, I'm not going to tell you it's going to be easy. And because of that, you need to be unified, and you need to be courageous. And so I don't think there's any question in our mind that God's called us to be courageous. But yet, that doesn't mean we shouldn't fear. Now, there's some things we should fear. Total lack of fear is not courage. That could be apathy. It could be stupidity. It could be recklessness. So, the idea, this worldly idea that there's some things we shouldn't fear, like, we should fear physical danger. I would not recommend that you walk on railroad tracks. There's a very good reason not to do that. You should fear a multi-ton piece of steel coming at you at 60 miles an hour. You should wear safety belts because of the fear of what could happen. Not just because it's the law, but because there's harm that could come. We should be fearful about things that could cause us to be sick. I don't recommend smoking cigarettes. It's not the worst thing in the world you could do, but we know that right on those cigarettes are a label. This could cause cancer. And I don't know anybody in the right mind that wants cancer. Now, I'm sympathetic to people that are addicted to tobacco and things like that. I'm not saying that in judgment, but it'd be foolish to say that we don't fear that. Now, I like athletics. I grew up in a sports family. And some of you might not agree with this, but I think a little bit of fear sometimes can be helpful. Remember back there when we saw the Hebrew word for fear, it means to be physically alert? Well, I know that when I was on a team, I enjoyed playing baseball and basketball and soccer and things like that. And I loved playing, but I also have to say that part of what motivated me was not just love, but I didn't want to let my teammates down. I didn't want to fail. Now, again, I'm not saying that you walk around like with this terrible paralyzing fear, but sometimes even fear of, wanting to not let your mom and dad down, or not let your community down, is something that can be healthy. So fear in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but courage is recognizing something or something is more important even than harmful consequences. There are times that God clearly calls us to look into a fearful situation like Daniel did, and to be thrown into that lion's den, or to be thrown into that Colosseum, or to stand up in that situation and be bold for Jesus Christ when you know your friends are going to make fun of you, or to give a testimony at a bill when you know that might not be the majority of the opinion of the citizens of the town where you live, to do those type of things. There are times that God says, yes, there may be negative consequences, and there may be times for you to avoid those consequences, but there are also times that you need to overcome that fear and do what I have called you to do. So what is it that gives us the confidence or the courage to overcome even those potential consequences? Well, first of all, I mentioned the word confidence. Sometimes there are earthly things that help us to look into a difficult situation and still tackle it. Things like our own physical strength, skills that we've developed, or training that we've got, like a good soldier. The better trained he is and the weapons that he has and things like that gives him the confidence that even though it's a dangerous situation, he feels that he can overcome it. Also, he may have a noble cause that also gives him the confidence or to be compelled to do something that is dangerous. Also, when we look at things like these circumstances where our confidence tells us that we have a chance, that's courageous. But in the last couple of minutes, I want to focus on what do we do when we are looking into a situation where there's legitimate fear, maybe physical harm, maybe harm to our reputation, maybe something else that we normally would avoid, but we know that we actually are obeying, doing something noble, doing something right, doing something courageous, knowing that we may suffer the consequence. Like I just mentioned a while ago in my job, sometimes I am called or I ask citizens to go before a committee and stand up for a bill or against a bill that the media and our culture does not agree with. And you risk being called a bigot, or you risk being calling a hater, or not caring about public health, or, things like that. But in your heart, it's the right thing you need to stand up for. What is it that gives us the courage to do that, even knowing that we might prevail or we might not prevail, but the chance of harm is great? I want to offer something to you that sounds pretty simplistic, but it really is the essence of our Christianity. I contend to you that when, someone asked Jesus, trying to trick him, what is the greatest command? Jesus said to love our God with all our heart, our mind, and all our strength. And the second is like unto it, that we should love our neighbors as ourselves. I believe that love can be the greatest motivator. Confidence in God, no matter what the consequence, but also that love for our neighbors that allows us to stand up and speak the truth or to do the right thing, because it's not only in our best interest. We're not just speaking in judgment. We're not just speaking out of fear and frustration, but we really know that what we're talking about is grounded in God's truth and is something that benefits our neighbors, our grandchildren, our opponents' grandchildren, our enemies' grandchildren. And love really can motivate us to do that. I just want to end about something that I really think is courageous. This has been a difficult year in a lot of ways because of the pandemic, and frankly, because of fear and things like that. And so I'm wondering if there's different things you've thought about, that as we've, talked about this topic. And I haven't been on your broadcast, the whole time to hear what the different topics are. But there's been a lot of talk about fear. And again, I respect people that might have a different level of fear or concern about things that we've been facing as a nation or in our homes. I understand that. But I want you to know that the trust in that we have Jesus Christ, God, our Heavenly Father, is trustworthy. We are in his hands. And I think about a very poignant picture I have in my mind of something that happened a couple of years ago that even publicly it's hard to speak about. When I saw 21, 22 men in orange jumpsuits on the Mediterranean Sea of the beach who were being told that they had to deny Jesus Christ in order to return to their country and be with their families. I didn't have everything in common with those men as they knelt beside the sea there, and they were given the opportunity to deny Christ. Doctrinally, I didn't agree with everything those men, they came from a different denomination and things like that, but they showed their courage. They trusting God, loving their Father, and even having the legacy to leave behind to their families, that nothing was more important, even the potential loss of life, and not denying Jesus Christ. So as I close today, and I want you to know, I hope it doesn't sound like just something to say, a platitude. It's an honor to me to speak to homeschoolers. I just appreciate you guys put your mouths where your money is, with your children, your families, the investment you make in your children's education. It's not the easy thing to do, that's for sure. And a lot of you show courage, but we are going to be challenged. When parents, especially, I'm speaking to you, man, the days ahead don't look easy in many, many ways for us to execute our testimony. But I just would encourage you, maybe when we're done, to look at that passage in Philippians 1:27 through 30, and then look at the next 4 verses, being the mind of Christ and the fellowship and the unity that's required to do this, that all of us might truly be courageous, not so that we get a medal, not so that we show up in the newspaper some way, but that we might honor and glorify our Lord, that men would be drawn to him because our lives are worthy of the gospel. Thank you. And again, just really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you so much, Carol, for those words. I really appreciate it. So timely for right now. And thank you for putting together this next piece, which is the virtual tour of the Capitol. So we're going to take a little tour of the Capitol. The governor's going to introduce some pieces about that, and we'll enjoy a short tour of our Capitol building. Thank you.
Hello, this is Governor Janet Mills. Welcome to the State House, and hello to my friend Carol Conley and to his friend, the homeschoolers from around Maine. I wish I could give you this tour in person, but we'll have to do this virtually for now. This is the safest way to do things right now. Someday soon, I hope you will walk the halls of the State House that I particularly love, the halls that I walk frequently, the halls that I know were walked by Maine's historic leaders over many, many years, over 200 years now. Leaders like Senator Margaret Chase Smith, the first woman in the country to serve in both houses of the United States Congress. And she delivered a speech, a famous speech called the Declaration of Conscience speech, against Joe McCarthy, a member of her own party, more than 60 years ago. Leaders like Governor Percival Baxter, who served about 100 years ago now, and who had the vision later on to purchase and preserve the land that is now Baxter State Park, including Mount Katahdin, to preserve it for all of us to use and enjoy. Leaders like Governor Israel Washburn, who was the governor during the beginning of the Civil War in Maine, and who co-founded the Maine Republican Party to protest the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed the evils of slavery to endure. So he was an anti-slavery, an abolitionist. These sons and daughters of Maine showed great courage in the face of insurmountable odds because they believed, as Margaret Chase Smith believed, that, quote, Public service must be more than doing a job efficiently and honestly. It must be a complete dedication to the people and to the nation, with full recognition that every human being is entitled to courtesy and consideration, that constructive criticism is not only to be expected but sought, that smears are not only to be expected but fought, and that honor is to be earned and not bought. During your virtual tour of the State House, I encourage you to think about the lessons our leaders of the past can teach us about the power of public service. While your visit is virtual for now, the State House will always welcome anyone who wishes to serve the people of Maine. So thank you and welcome.
Welcome to the Maine State House. The State House was built in 1829, and it was designed by a gentleman named Charles Bulfinch. Mr. Bulfinch was a very famous architect. In fact, he's reputed to be the country's first architect. Bulfinch designed our building at the same time that he was actually rebuilding the nation's Capitol building in Washington, D.C., as he was undertaking the rebuilding of the Capitol after it was substantially destroyed by the British during the War of 1812. He was designing our building. When Maine gained statehood in 1820, our first capital city was the city of Portland. That was a temporary arrangement, and there were several reasons for that. Chief among those was the fact that people felt that Portland was too far south to remain our capital for very long. So on February 24th, 1827, Governor Enoch Lincoln signed the bill into law naming Augusta as the new capital. The capital was moved here to Augusta from Portland upon completion of this building. The first official use of this building, which was actually the first legislative session, happened on January 4th, 1832. Now, since it's been here such a long time, it shouldn't be too surprising that there have been some changes made to the original building. In 1890, the rear section of the building was added. So where you see the floor tiles change, from that point back is the 1890 addition. And by 1909, state government had outgrown the original building. So in order to enlarge the building and have it accommodate all the needs of state government, some of the original had to be taken apart first. The original small wood frame dome was removed. The roof over the entire original building was removed. The front wall and the front facade, however, were left intact. So what's out there today in the front of the building is original from 1829. Another original feature of the State House is the floor on which we are now standing. This floor is Italian marble, and the tiles on the floor are individual tiles. They're tiny, tiny individual tiles, which were laid on this floor, one tiny little tile at a time. It took approximately a year and a half to lay all the tiles on this floor. Occupying an obvious space of honor, here in the middle of our Hall of Flags, is a bust of a gentleman named Percival Proctor Baxter. He was governor of Maine from 1921 to 1925, but he's honored here for more than his public service. He's honored for his extremely generous gift to the state of Maine. After his public life, starting around 1931 until his death in 1969, Governor Baxter purchased, using his own money, he was fabulously rich, he purchased about 200,000 acres of land, which he then, of course, gave to the state of Maine. And that land now comprises a state park, which is appropriately named in his honor. It's called Baxter State Park. According to his wishes, there's hunting allowed in only about 25% of the park. He intended it as a wildlife refuge. This is a portrait of a grand lady from Maine whose name was Margaret Chase Smith. She was from Skowhegan, Maine. Margaret Chase Smith had the distinction of having been the first woman in this country ever to have been elected to both houses of the United States Congress. In 1940, she was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. She served there until 1948 when she was elected to the United States Senate, thereby becoming the first woman ever to accomplish that feat. When she was elected to the Senate in 1948, she became the first woman ever elected to the Senate as well. She also had the distinction of having been the first woman in this country ever to have her name placed in nomination for President of the United States by a major political party. That happened at the Republican National Convention in San Francisco in 1964. Because that year, the Republican nomination went to the senator from Arizona, Senator Barry Goldwater. But the mere fact that so many people thought so highly of this lady was quite significant, that they wanted her to run for president. For a lady in 1964, And the fact that she was from Maine gives us here in Maine a great deal of pride in that lady. This is a portrait of a gentleman named Thomas Brackett Reed, who was a congressman from Maine, served in the U.S. House of Representatives in the late 1800s, several terms as Speaker of the House of Representatives. Was an extremely powerful speaker, earning himself the title Czar Reed. Many of the rules that he instituted as Speaker of the House are still used to this day. They're called Reed's Rules. I especially like Congressman Brackett for his very acerbic wit. He was once asked if he would attend the funeral of a political rival. He said, "No, but I do approve of it." Another time, he was asked if he thought his party might nominate him for president, the Republican Party. He said they could certainly do worse, and very likely they will. And then finally, a fellow congressman at one point very pompously stated, "Well, I'd rather be right than be president." And Speaker Reed said, "Well, the gentleman needn't worry, he'll never be either." So he had a very acerbic wit. We're in the House chamber. Maine's House consists of 151 members. Each member of the House represents about 8,600 or 8,700 people. The representatives serve 2-year terms. And in Maine, we have term limits. They can serve no more than 4 consecutive 2-year terms. At the end of 8 years, they are termed out. The term limit law was passed in 1992, took effect in 1996, and it was as a result of a citizen initiative. It was not enacted by the legislature. It is a citizen legislature. It's a part-time legislature. The average legislator could easily be described as the average Mainer. We have people from all walks of life who serve here. We have teachers, we have plumbers, we have people who work in paper mills. And so the population of the legislature is a very good mirror of the population of the state of Maine. When the speaker moves an item, he uses a gavel to move that item. And very often, the speaker will, it's a wooden gavel, and very often the speaker will be a little too aggressive and break the gavel. And because business cannot be conducted without a gavel, then the clerk of the House, who stands here, is prepared with additional gavels in her drawer. Maine Senate consists of 35 senators. The districts are apportioned according to population. There's a quaint rule in the Senate that prohibits anyone from sitting in a senator's chair other than the senator to whom that chair is assigned. Even staff people, when they come in to work at the desks, may not sit in a senator's chair. If they want to sit, as they straighten out the desks, they have to move the chair out and bring in their own chair to sit down. We're standing in the rotunda. The rotunda is on the 3rd floor of the State House. And in the rotunda, we have portraits of governors. And we call this the governor's rotation because the immediate past governor always has his portrait displayed right here. This is our immediate past governor, John Baldacci. When Governor LePage is no longer in office, his portrait will come here. And Governor Baldacci will move over. Governor King will move over. And all the governors will move over to make room for Governor LePage. And that's why we call it the governor's rotation. This is a portrait of Governor McKernan, John McKernan, who was married to one of our 2 United States Senators, Olympia Snowe, whose picture can be seen on the credenza on which Governor McKernan is leaning. There's a photograph of he, his wife, Olympia Snowe, and his son from a previous marriage, who tragically died when he was in college from a previously undetected heart condition. As we tour through the building, we see, certainly in comparison to other buildings of this type throughout the country, other state houses, other Capitol buildings, that our building is somewhat plain, somewhat simple. There's no opulence at the Maine State House. There's nothing at the Maine State House that will take a person's breath away. But its very simple nature speaks volumes for the Puritan ethic that was very prevalent in Maine. If you want to use one word out of the English language to describe Maine and its people, the perfect word for that would be frugal. And so you can see frugality throughout this entire building. And that's an excellent portrait or picture of the people of Maine and the entire state.
Thank you, Carol Conley from the Christian Civic League, for putting this together, your speaking piece and the governor's intro and the tour. We're very grateful for that. And it was really fun to see inside of the Capitol building. I was thinking it would be fun at some point for us homeschoolers here to maybe get together at some point and take a field trip. That would be really fun. I'm just going to do a couple reminders while we're getting the next thing ready for you. I'm just letting you know what is left on our schedule for our rally. Next, we're going to have Martha Ballard from History speak to us. Victoria Buckland will be playing her, Martha Ballard. And then after that, we will have Nick Levitt, who is the winner of our essay contest, will share his essay. We're excited about that. And then we'll have Max from the First Amendment Museum speaking to us about freedom of speech. I'm very excited about that. And we will have the Maine State Museum here with us as well. So we're thankful that we have some great people with us today. So next we have Victoria Buckland, who will be playing Martha Ballard. Victoria is an educator and she is a home leader on our legislative team. And she'll be playing Martha Ballard, who was a midwife and a healer who lived in Hollowell, Maine from the late 1700s until the early 1800s. Thank you, Victoria.
Greetings. My name is Martha Ballard. I lived in the late 1700s and early 1800s in a town called Hallowell. You would know my town now as being Augusta, Maine, but back then it was part of Massachusetts. I was a midwife. Do you know what a midwife is? She's a woman that helps mothers bring their babies into the world. In those days, there were no hospitals like you have today, and doctors did not deliver babies. Midwives did. People also relied on me as a healer. Outside my kitchen door, I grew lots of special herbs, which I dried and stored. I also loved to go on walks through the woods and along the shores of the Kennebec River and its streamlets, searching for other plants to use. Here's my basket that I used to collect some of those herbs. Burdock, catnip, makes wonderful tea, mullein, pennyroyal, and rue. These and many other herbs help in curing fevers, rashes, coughs, aches and pains, and all number of other ailments. My life was very full. I was married to Ephraim Bullard, who was a surveyor and often away from home. We had 9 children, and there was lots to do in managing the household, feeding, clothing, educating, and keeping our home warm and dry. However, I was also blessed with this skill in bringing comfort and care to others. Since I was called out at all hours of the day and night, I decided to keep a diary. Here's a copy of my diary, which I wrote in for 27 years, from 1785 until 1812. In this diary, I recorded the 816 babies I delivered, along with the many other services I provided people in need. Since paper and ink and time were scarce, my entries are a bit sparse. But I would like to read a few of them to you if you don't mind. Now, we have to remember that in those days, Hallowell was a seaport 8 months of the year. When the ice went out in the spring, the Kennebec River became filled with boats bringing people and goods from afar and taking our wood, fish, ice, and other things to other ports. The day that the ice left the Kennebec was a very important event. It changed the way we traveled and the goods and services to which we had access. One year, on April 1st, The river was covered with ice, and I walked across it after breakfast to help a mother in labor. By afternoon, the river was open and raging, and I had to find another way home. Of course, a midwife has to go out at all times of the day and night and in all kinds of weather. It took great courage sometimes to make the long and sometimes lonely trip to help others. The spring of 1789 was an especially challenging season, what with a flooding river and a rising tide of births. Here is the story as written in my diary. April 23rd. Clear and very pleasant. I set out to go to Mrs. B's, stepped out of the canoe and sunk in the mire, came back and changed my clothes, made another attempt and got safe there. Set out for home, called in at Captain C's and Mr. D's, was called to Mrs. H's, tarried all night, a severe storm before morn. This was one of the many nights I was unable to make it home. One year, I lost 42 nights of sleep. April 24th, a severe storm of rain. I was called at 1 p.m. from Mr. H's by Ebenezer. Crossed the river in their boat. A great sea a-going. We got safe over, set out for Mr. K's. I crossed a stream on the way on fleeting logs. Safe over. Wonderful full is the goodness of Providence. I then proceeded on my journey, went beyond Mr. K's, and a large tree blew up by the roots before me, which caused my horse to spring back, and my life was spared. Great and marvelous are thy sparing mercies, O God. I was assisted over the fallen log by Mr. K, went on, soon came to a stream. The bridge was gone. Mr. H took the reins and waded through and led the horse. Assisted by the same almighty power, I got safe through and arrived unhurt. Mrs. H safe delivered at 10 hours even of a daughter. There is a note in the margin of my diary. My cloak was burnt while there, so it was not wearable. Someone must have left my cloak too close to the fire to dry. April 25th, rainy. I came from Mr. H's to Mr. P's. My horse mired, got stuck in the mud again, and I fell off in the mud. But blessed be to God, I received no hurt. Mr. H attended me to Mrs. G's. We arrived at 11-hour morning. Mrs. N was in travail. Her women were immediately called, and she was safe delivered at 5 hours, 30 minutes even of a fine sun. Her husband and Mrs. D and her children went on board bound for Nantucket that very morning. They had to leave before the baby was born because of the tides and the wind. April 26th, a very cold morning, snowed. Remember, my cloak was burned. It was very cold. I took my leave of Mrs. G and family, came to Mr. H's. He and William brought me from Fort Western by the water. Have you ever been to Fort Western? It's a wonderful place to go visit. I would highly recommend it. I left my patients, cleverly found my family well. It was the greatest flooding in this river that has been this many years. That day I crossed the raging river twice. One year, our mill was completely washed away by the spring floods. I hope you've enjoyed hearing a bit about my life. I pray that you work diligently to develop those talents that God has blessed you with. If you want to know more about how people lived in those times and about my life and adventures, you might enjoy a book, A Midwife's Tale, by Laura Thatcher Ulrich. Thank you for listening to my story. Goodbye.
Wow, thank you, Victoria. That was amazing. I'm really excited to introduce Nick Levitt. He's the winner of our essay contest. He's an 11-year-old sixth grader from Friendship, and he really is an amazing homeschooler. Hi, Nick.
Hi.
You ready?
Yep.
All right.
My example of courage. My great uncle George Allen Zomberg, who was a sergeant in the United States Army, is a role model of courage for me. He enlisted in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War. He was 18 years old. That is an example of courage to me because he knew he might be killed. When his first tour was up, he signed up for another. That is an act of courage because he chose to endure the hardships of war again. It was brave of him to give up his life at home and be shipped overseas and maybe never see his family again. Uncle George was killed by shrapnel August 14th, 1967. Uncle George gave his life for his country and for people he didn't know. That is an amazing example of courage.
Wow, thank you so much. Wonderful to hear that. Next, we have Maxwell Nosbish, who is the manager of visitor experiences at the First Amendment Museum in Augusta. He's going to talk about how living the freedoms found in the First Amendment often takes a lot of courage. After Max speaks, he will be taking questions from us. So thank you so much, Max, for being here and talking with us about this really important topic.
There we go. All right, can you hear me? Sorry about that. Yeah, my bad. I'm always going back and forth between Google Meets and Zoom when I'm doing these things. So sometimes it can get a little like lost in translation on the technology side. I know she said that I'm taking questions after, but really the way I like to do my virtual field trips is sort of, I'm going to be asking you guys a lot of questions. It's very discussion based. It's very participant based. We are talking about the First Amendment. We are talking about free speech. So let's use our free speech and respond. And if you want, it would help me because I'll be asking you guys stuff. It'll help me if you guys turn on your videos and I can see people like do this to the camera if they have a question or if they want to respond. Like I said, I'll be asking all sorts of stuff. And can you guys see my PowerPoint? Is that pulled up on your screen? You see me and then you see courage in the First Amendment. Great. I like to see the thumbs up. Again, it lets me know that I can interact with all you guys. Excellent. So again, if you have any questions at all, or if you have any thoughts or anything you want to, more explanation on, please feel free to ask me. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff today, and I know I have till, 1 o'clock? Is that correct? Great. So again, I try to keep it lively. I try to keep it fun. So don't think this is like a dour, very serious topic, even though we are talking about the Constitution. That is very serious, but I do try to keep it lighthearted. So courage in the First Amendment is our topic today. I know courage is the theme for for a Capitol Day this year. So we're going to be blending these two topics. So let's get into it. So just a little introduction. My name is Max. I work at the First Amendment Museum in Augusta, Maine, right next to the state capitol. So it's apt that I'm here on Capitol Day because I'm right next door. I can go to the other room and look at the Capitol. And I just want to thank all you guys for having me here. Again, don't be afraid to ask questions, give your opinion, share your thoughts. Again, let your voice be heard. Now is your chance, right? We live in a democracy. We got free speech, so let's use it. So let's get started. So let me ask you guys a question first. And again, if you want to answer, just unmute yourself and shout it out. How do we bring about change in this country, in the United States? Anybody know? Any guesses? Any thoughts? Nobody knows? Nobody has any idea? Sorry?
Voting.
Voting. Yeah, voting is one. What else do we got? What do we have to do before we get to voting? You want to know, you want to be informed, right? So how do we do that? How do we get to be informed, and how do we voice our opinions and get our thoughts out there? Does anybody have any idea? Can we change this country even if we want to? Can we? I don't know. So someone tell me how. Nobody knows. Well, that's okay. I'll tell you guys. We do it through what's called the First Amendment. And I know that's like a really weird thing, that like amendment, what does that mean? Don't worry, we'll talk about that. So what is the First Amendment? Does anybody know what the First Amendment is or have any idea what it is? Anybody at all? I know Chris
Freedom of
Wilcox's family knows. You guys better know. That's how I met them first. So
Freedom of
besides them-
speech.
So freedom of speech is part of it. Anybody know what else is part of the First Amendment?
Religion.
Freedom of the press.
Religion, press. Anybody?
Freedom of petition.
Petition, and one more.
Assembly.
Assembly, yeah. So you have 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. Let's get a drum roll going I'm about to show the almighty text of the First Amendment, the sacred text of our Constitution. So prepare yourself. So you guys ready for this? So right here, I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask Kylie Hines. Can you read this for me? Can you read it all for us? I know it's a lot of text, but can you try to get through it? If you don't want to, that's okay.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Thereof, yeah, it's an interesting word.
Or
Abridging.
the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of
grievances.
So
good job. Very good, very good. It's okay. It's all right, because if that put you to sleep and made you feel pretty bored, then I don't blame you, because it's a lot of big words. It's hard to really understand. There's a lot of like abridge thereof. I mean, this was written like 250 years ago, so people that wrote it weren't really going to make the most exciting thing in the world. So if you felt bored reading that, don't feel too bad, because a lot of people do. So let's just break that down. Like, what does any of that mean? What does any of those words mean? You've got 5 freedoms found inside. You got freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and freedom of petition. So those are your 5 freedoms found in the First Amendment. Again, if you're going like, I don't really understand what any of that is, don't worry. We'll talk about it. But these are the 5 freedoms we need in our country, in the state of Maine, to make democracy happen. And democracy applies to all of you guys. The Constitution, the First Amendment, applies to all of you guys. It applies to me. It applies to your parents. It applies to everyone who's a citizen in the United States. So everybody here has these 5 freedoms. Again, we sort of take them for granted in the United States. A lot of times we don't really appreciate them. We only appreciate them when someone tries to take them away. So keep that in mind. So those are your 5 freedoms. 5 freedoms. Woo! Boom! Explosion. So what are these freedoms? Well, let's talk about them. Let's break them down. So freedom of religion, what is that? This one's a little complicated. This one you have to be like a philosopher to really like get into. So what is freedom of religion? Can anybody like help me out with that one? Anybody? To Turner and Julie Morse, do you guys want to take a shot at it?
The right to believe in any religion.
Right. And what is a religion? Someone tell me what a religion is. Again, you have to be really smart to answer this question. What is a religion? Sure, go ahead. Julie and Turner.
A belief of like a god or something.
Sure. Yeah. Can anybody give me an example of a religion they might know? Anybody know any religions? Can we name one? Can we give like the proper name for any religions? You guys got to know.
Christians.
Sorry?
Christians.
Christians. So Christianity. Anybody know any other religions? Oh, well, there's a lot of different religions. There's like tons and tons of different world religions out there. There's different religions in the state of Maine. If you go to Portland, you walk around downtown and you see like 50 million churches. These are all usually different religions. So there's a lot of different ways to believe. And that's essentially what a religion is. It's what you believe about the world. It's what you think what is your worldview? Is there a creator? Is there not a creator? Do we have a purpose? Is there a destiny? All of these things. And you have to have freedom of religion to have freedom of thought. Because if I tell you guys you have to follow a religion I made up, you guys can't think freely. Because if I tell you, oh, well, there is no this, there is this, and blah, 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 then you can't think for yourself because you have to think for whatever I'm teaching you. So freedom of religion is extremely important. And that's why it's the first one in the First Amendment, because it protects your right to think. And that's the most important thing to live in a free society. You have to be able to think. So that's why freedom of religion is so, so important. So freedom of speech. What is that? What is freedom of speech? What is speech? Let's talk about that first. What even is speech? Cowan S., you want to give a shot?
Talking out loud to like a lot of people.
Yeah, like what we're doing right now, right? Like in a way, I'm kind of speaking freely to everybody. What else is speech?
Hand up. Vaughn's gonna say something. Go ahead.
You wanna?
Go ahead.
You can say anything you want.
You can say maybe, yeah. We have some restrictions on, you can pretty much say anything you want in the United States within reason. But you know, speech is also movies. It's music. It's making signs. It's making art. So if you do any of those things, again, making signs, making music, watching movies, making movies, uploading to YouTube, all of this stuff, getting on Zoom, all of this stuff is examples of speech. So we like to think of it as just me talking, or someone talking, or like getting up in like a podium and like speechifying to everybody, but it's a lot more than that. And I see in the chat, someone said anything that conveys a message. That's pretty much it, right? Like it's your clothes you're wearing. It's anything that can convey some sort of message to everybody is speech. So it's a very powerful thing. It's how we share our ideas. You know, freedom of religion gives us the freedom to think. Freedom of speech gives us the ability to share our ideas with others. And we have to do that in a free society in order to get the best ideas, okay? Because we can't just have one person coming up with all the ideas for everybody. You have to be able to agree, disagree, debate, argue. All of that stuff is important with free speech. So freedom of the press. What is this one? This one might be a little trickier. What is freedom of the press? Or what even is the press? I know it could be a tough concept. What is the press? See some chats. Can you guys see the chat when I pull it up? News. Everyone's just saying news, news, news. So yeah, Turner and Julie Morris, you guys want to say something? No? Okay. So yeah, it's the news, right? Freedom of the press is basically freedom of the news. And you know, what is the news? It's the people on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, the people you see on TV who are sitting there in their nice suits and they're talking to you and telling you what's going on in the world. And you see the news updates scrolling at the bottom of the screen. That's the news. It's listening to the radio. Sometimes you'll have someone with a microphone will be like screaming over the radio about a very important issue and everybody will be listening. That's also the news. It's reading articles online. So like sometimes like the Central Maine or the Kennebec Journal or the Portland Press Herald, they'll post articles online that you can go read. So all of these are the press. You know, it's photographers, it's people going out and taking pictures of your favorite celebrities and putting it on news articles, right? And what else is the press? You know, the press is not only that. Is it YouTubers? Does that count as a news source? Is it Facebook posts? Are blogs online that you read? Are those journalists? If I go and see something happen down the street and I come and tell all my friends and I report it to them, does that make me a reporter? Because I'm telling you what I saw. So, you know, and it gets to the point where it's like, what is the difference between freedom of speech and freedom of the press, right? Like they're like very intertwined. It's hard to really like know what the difference is, but that's what freedom of the press is. It's the ability to share the news. So freedom of religion allows you to think, freedom of speech allows you to share your ideas with others. And then freedom of the press takes those ideas and brings them out to a massive audience, takes them way outside your circle and gives them to the whole world. That's why freedom of the press is important. And can the press lie? Yeah, there's nowhere in the Constitution does it say the press has to tell the truth. You know, it just says freedom of the press. I mean, so it's, you know, the press can lie. The press not only informs, it also entertains. It has crossword puzzles in it. I'm talking about newspapers. It has word searches. It has ads to sell things. It has human interest pieces. So it tells us just about people's lives. So not only does it inform us, it entertains us, it inspires us, it does all of these things. So press is very important in the United States. Obviously, freedom of the press is very important in the United States. So freedom of assembly, what is it? And if you need help, just look at the picture. What is going on in that picture? What are we doing right now? Anybody know what freedom of assembly is? Like what?
Gathering.
Yeah, it's gathering, the freedom to get together. Exactly. Yeah. And why would that be important to democracy or freedom? Like, why is that important? Anybody? Anybody have any ideas of why getting together? Like, what are we doing right now? Like, what am I talking to you guys about? Like, pretend if we didn't have freedom of assembly, we couldn't do this. Yeah, you got to get together to share ideas, right? And talk about things and debate things. So that's why freedom of assembly is so important, because if I was the dictator of America, if someone said, we want Max from the First Amendment Museum to rule our country, and I made a law that said nobody can get together, I'm taking away freedom of assembly, then you'd just be isolated and all alone, right? You have to go, I make the law saying you have to stay in your room all day and don't get on the internet. Then there's no way you can do anything. You can't get together, you can't hold debates, you can't hold a protest, you can't have a march, you can't join clubs, all of these things. That's why freedom of assembly is so important. Yeah, someone said no. So so no is right? Like we don't want that. Like we want to be able to get together and do all these things. And you know, it's not even like we talk about like all this political stuff, but freedom of assembly is just, you know, it could be even just getting together with your family for like Thanksgiving or 4th of July. It's getting together with your friends for coffee. It's hanging out and going, like walking down the street, playing kickball or whatever. All of that is you practicing your freedom of assembly. It doesn't have to just be about politics. And that's with all the, you know, First Amendment freedoms. So freedom of petition, what is this one? This one is, you know, it could be the hardest to grasp for a lot of people. What is freedom of petition?
It's the freedom to make a document and have others people sign it, see if they agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. So if you ever, you know, a lot of you guys, you know, I see a lot of some older kids, I see some younger kids, but at some point in your life, you're probably going to sign a petition. And, you know, I might start my petition and I say, I want to ban everybody that wears or has a red piece of furniture in their house. So looks like Kylie Hines, Turner and Julie Morris and Brandy Shunk, you guys are out of luck, right? Like you guys are all going to jail for owning red furniture. If I get my law passed, and so I go around to everybody, I go around to all my neighbors, and we all sign my petition saying we agree with Max that we want to ban red furniture. And then we go and give that petition to the mayor or the president, and the leader looks at that and they goes, oh, wow, like Max he got 8 million signatures on his petition to ban red furniture. Like, whew, guess I better make that a law, huh? Like, or I'll get voted out of office if all these people support me or support Max and his crazy plan. So that's what a petition is. Petitioning is also just having the ability to call the government, right? It's saying like, oh man, I just saw what Janet Mills or Joe Biden, or I saw what they're doing, and I'm going to call my representative because I don't like that, or I do like that. I'm going to tell them I really appreciate their new plan. So it's having the ability to call your representatives. It's also having the ability to write your representative letters. So again, if someone's angry about something that Janet Mills did or is happy about what Janet Mills is and you want to show your support, you can write them letters. And that's all protected under freedom of petition. It's contacting your representatives. It's getting in touch with them. If the government now says that you can't contact your representative, that's a violation of the First Amendment. So kind of important. And I'll try not to send Brandy Shunk to jail, but no promises. I'm looking at the chat. And someone said, "Together we are strong." Yeah, it's like Planet of the Apes, right? Have you ever seen that movie? Like apes together strong. That's like humans. Once we're together, we're strong. So moving on. So where can I find the First Amendment? Where is it? Anybody know? Anybody know where it is? Like, it's got to be somewhere, right? It's got to exist somewhere. It's got to be written somewhere. Where is it? Where is the First Amendment? In the Bill of Rights. And where is the Bill of Rights?
In the Constitution.
In the Constitution. And if you don't know what the Constitution is, don't worry, I'll tell you. It's a big document, a big old document. You see a picture of it there. You see a couple pictures. I'll pull some up. So you see the Constitution. It's a big old piece of paper with some fancy writing on it, quill pen. It says "We the People." It has a lot of very small words. Document's very old, like 250 years old. It was written by our founding fathers. So it's a dictator Max. Sorry, the chat is funny. You guys are funny in the chat. I don't know if you can see the chat on my screen, but yeah, so the Constitution's a big old giant piece of paper that tells us what the laws of the United States are. So our founding fathers got together and they met in Philadelphia and they all started arguing about what the laws of the United States should be. And it was going on years. Like this took forever. Like this wasn't like, oh, is my voice echoing? Sorry, sometimes happens. I can read. Am I sounding any better? Do I sound fine? Yes, no? No. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rejoin the call. Is that okay? Because usually that works. Is that fine? Okay, so I'll be right back. Think about the Constitution, how important it is, and prepare some good comments on why it matters. So I'm back. Can you guys hear me now? Do I sound okay? Yep. Just turning it on and off usually works. Yay, I sound all right. Okay, so let me share my screen once more. Okay, can you guys see the presentation? Everyone see that? Let me move my people over here. Yeah, so the hazards of technology, sometimes things happen, but we're back. So the Constitution, again, it's the laws of our country. And does Maine, the state of Maine, have a constitution? Yes, no? Does Maine have a constitution? Yes, Maine does have a constitution. So Maine has a constitution. All of the 50 states have a constitution. And then the US government has a constitution. So there are a lot of constitutions floating around. And throughout your life, people are probably going to tell you to go read it. So you should probably read it at some point, but again, it's very boring. So like spend a lot of time, give yourself like 2 months and just read like a part of it a day, and then you'll be fine. We're already learning about the First Amendment, so I'm already getting you guys a really good head start. So that's the Constitution. Woo! It's America. It's our freedom. It's very important. We're always going to be fighting about it. We're always going to be disagreeing about it, but it gives us our freedom to do all that. So rah, rah, Constitution's awesome. So now I have a little quiz, just one question, and it's just, what is an amendment? And you can either shout out the answer A, B, C, or D, or you can write it in the chat. So an amendment A is either a change or addition to the Constitution. B, an amendment is an old article to the Constitution. C, an amendment is when you draft a new Constitution, and there are many of them. D, an amendment is what the Supreme Court tells Congress it must add to the Constitution. So what one, is it A, B, C, or D? What is an amendment? Big, complicated word, annoying word to say. What is an amendment?
A.
A. Woo! Yes. Genius. Yes, you are correct. An amendment, again, big fancy word, amendment, is just a change or addition to the Constitution. There are 27 of them. So whenever our country gets together and says we want to add or change something about the Constitution, we add an amendment to the Constitution. Again, there are 27. That's a lot. Can anybody think of any other amendments besides the first one? Like what else? What are some of your other freedoms? This is very important. You guys got to know your freedoms, right? What are some other amendments in there?
Right to bear arms.
Right to bear arms. It's the Second Amendment. Turner and Julie Morris. You guys have one?
Right to, isn't it turn down the soldiers?
You can do it. Yeah.
I forget what it was.
19th Amendment. Someone wrote in chat. Yes, that was 100 years ago in 1920. Passing women giving women the right to vote. So that's an important amendment, right? Any other amendments? Oh my gosh, you guys! Oh, I'm gonna have to email you all copies of the Constitution so you know your freedoms. It's sad. I'm scared. You guys don't know what you're allowed to do. That's okay. I didn't know either until I started working here. But again, so there's a lot of different amendments. Someone said 3. Third Amendment, yes. There's a 10th Amendment. There's all sorts of amendments. Yeah. So why is the First Amendment the First Amendment in the Constitution? I know that's kind of tricky. Why is the First Amendment the First Amendment? Why? Why is there an order? Does the order matter at all? You know, why is the Second Amendment the Second Amendment? Why is the 10th Amendment the 10th Amendment? Why is the First Amendment the first? Don't worry, I'll tell you. The First Amendment, again, protects those 5 freedoms. We talked about religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. And those are your 5 most essential freedoms, because those are the 5 freedoms you need to make democracy happen, to make our Republican government happen, and to be a free person. Because if I strip you of all 5 of those freedoms, then all the rest don't matter. If I strip you of your free speech, your free press, your freedom of assembly, then the rest really don't matter. So that's why the first one that's why it's the first, because it's the most important. You see, the founding fathers thought about this stuff. They weren't just willy-nilly throwing stuff in the Constitution and saying like, good job, we did this in an hour, let's go home. No, they were like haggled over it for a very long time. And they really thought about the order. Yes, Susie Delaney. Yes, it's the most important. You're correct, David Mason. All of you guys are correct. So let's do a quick review. What 5 freedoms are found in the First Amendment? Anybody want to tell me? Just shout them out or write it in chat.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of assembly.
Freedom of assembly.
Freedom of press.
Freedom of press. 2 more.
Freedom of religion.
Religion. What's the last one? Petition. Petition. Yes. Woo! 5 freedoms. Very important. What is the Constitution? Nobody knows what the Constitution is? After I just shouted about it for like 5 minutes, nobody knows what the Constitution is? Not one person. Someone said or laws, I think. Laws. Come on, what is the Constitution?
It is the foundation of America.
Yeah, it's the foundation of our government. It's the laws of our land. It applies to all of you guys. So it's very important. It applies to me too. So it's the laws. It tells us what we can and can't do. And what is an amendment?
It is an
Yeah, it's a change or addition to the Constitution. So again, can we pass an amendment today? If we wanted to add to the Constitution, if we wanted to pass a amendment today, could we? Is that possible? Could we change the Constitution today?
Yes.
Yes, we still can. So don't think that it's just like said and done and we've settled on 27. If we really want to, it takes a lot of work, but if we really wanted to, we could add to the Constitution or change it even today through the amendment process. And did you know that our Constitution, the United States of America's Constitution, is the 2nd oldest Constitution in the entire world that's still in use? The 2nd oldest Constitution in the world that's still in use. And that's because the amendment process gives us the ability to change it. You want to know which country has an older Constitution than the United States? Tiny, tiny country in Europe called San Marino. So, America, big bad America lost out to a tiny, tiny San Marino. But don't worry, there's still time. You know, the future is unwritten. Maybe their Constitution will collapse and we'll continue. So it's still a chance, guys. So yes, good job. Excellent job during the review. Wonderful. So now I got another question. What is courage? And I've got some help there if you've ever seen The Wizard of Oz. What is courage, as the Cowardly Lion says?
Courage is the
Being brave in the face of fear. Thank you, Bree, Aaron, Abby. To stand up for what is right. Baloo family. Yes. What else? What else is courage? What does the Cowardly Lion lack? What does he need to confront the Wicked Witch of the West, right? Wizard of Oz. Brave. Yes, it's kind of a synonym for brave. Means the same thing, basically. So yeah, bravery. So we kind of got it. I mean, it's pretty something that I think we all know what courage is, basically. I have some definitions. The expression of boldness and confidence, the opposite of fear, strength in the face of adversity, so strength in the face of your problems. Something is more important than fear, standing up for what's right, yes. Courage, the original definition of courage, oops, trying to move the chat. Courage, the original definition of courage, when it first came into the English language, it's from the Latin word cor, meaning heart. And the original definition was to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. So that's kind of a fun definition. Courage, the ability to do something that frightens one. Strength in the face of pain and grief. So do we kind of get what courage is? Pretty self-evident. So let me ask the crowd, what's an example of a time you've been courageous in your life? Maybe you rode that roller coaster and that was very scary. Like, someone give me an example of a time they were courageous. And feel free to brag, let us don't be afraid to talk, to be proud of yourself for the time you were brave. Anybody?
I went on a roller coaster in Six Flags, what was really twirly, and it was called the Wicked Cycle.
Yeah, man, I used to be totally afraid of roller coasters. Like, I used to be so scared of them. And I only got over it by going on a bunch. And now I think they're just like, oh yeah, they're okay. Like, they're fine. But I used to be so scared of them. Yeah, someone said surgery. Yeah, you got to have a lot of courage. That can be so intense. Not everybody goes through that, but a lot of people do. And have just the thought of it. The only surgery I've undergone was getting my wisdom teeth out. And that even made me scared. I was really scared. And then they put me out to sleep, and then they took my wisdom teeth out. And then I was like, boop, and it was like, oh, that was nothing. So now if someone told me I had to get my wisdom teeth out again, I would be like, oh, that's really inconvenient, but it's not that scary, right? Because I confronted my fear. Having teeth pulled, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Competing in a race. Yeah, that can be intense, especially, anything where you have to compete, where you have to really put yourself out there and you get ranked and people are judging you. That can take a lot of courage. Giving in front of a speech in front of an audience of people. Yeah. I think everybody has to do that probably at least one point in their life. And that can take a lot of courage, especially if you're talking about something that people might disagree with you. If you want to be a politician one day and you have to go out there and start screaming your head off about your ideas, and people are like that can take a lot of courage, right? People, being authentically you takes a lot of courage. Brandy Shunk, you're 100% correct. Just being yourself often takes a lot of courage. And that can be a bold thing to do. And sometimes people won't like it. And but if you're living authentically, you're sort of putting yourself out there. Driving, yeah. Especially when you're going 80 miles down the road in the middle of Maine at night. Yeah, that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of bravery. So yeah, all courage. So what does courage have to do with the First Amendment? Someone connect these for me. What these seem like two different concepts. What could they possibly have to do with each other? Anybody know? Our founding fathers were pretty courageous, right? What did our founding fathers do that was
courageous? To stand up for what you believe in. Yeah,
standing up for what you believe in. Yeah, that takes a heck of a lot of courage, right? Especially in the face of power, reading your essay on Zoom. Yeah. Keeping the freedoms that we're talking about is very, it takes a lot of courage, and we're going to explore some examples of that. How did our founding fathers, people like George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, how were they courageous?
By by writing a letter to Great Britain.
They did more than write a letter to Great Britain. They did a lot more than but they did write a letter. It was called the Declaration of Independence. What else did they do? What else did they do with that that breakup letter, I guess? Did we fight a big war to get our freedom?
Made a very weak government.
Okay. Did they fight a war? Did we fight a war against Britain for our freedom?
Yes.
Did that take a lot of courage?
Yes.
Yes. Britain was very powerful back then. They were the most powerful country on the planet. And we fought a war against them for our freedom. A lot of the freedoms found in the Constitution, in fact. So living your freedoms, fighting for your freedoms, practicing your freedoms can take a lot of courage, especially when people don't like what you're doing, when people disagree with you, especially if you have an unpopular opinion. All of that takes a lot of courage. You often must be courageous when using your First Amendment freedoms. It's just a fact. Freedom of speech doesn't protect mainstream opinions. Freedom of speech doesn't protect what everyone's saying. It's meant to protect the odd opinion. Freedom of speech is meant to protect the unpopular opinion. That's why we have freedom of speech, not to protect the normal opinions that everyone has, to protect the people that don't have the usual opinions. That's why it's important. So this lady back in the olden days, you can see that it was the olden days because it's black and white, and just look at her, she looks like she's alive a long time ago. She said, if we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything. What does that quote mean? Anybody know what that quote means? It's kind of beautiful. It's kind of poetic. What does that mean? If we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything. Someone said I'd like to live in the 40s and 50s. Yeah, she was alive back then. So having convictions. Yes, Jessica, leave it. Yes, standing up for what you believe in, essentially, is knowing yourself and knowing why you're strong and what you believe in, and not letting other people take that away from you. So that's what it's a great quote. If you don't stand up for something, we'll fall for anything. So let's look at some examples of people standing up for themselves, of people using their First Amendment freedoms very courageously. So it's kind of story time. I'm going to break them down by the freedom. So we have freedom of religion first, because it's the first one. And I want to tell you guys about a little religion, maybe a big religion, called the Jehovah's Witnesses. So Jehovah's Witnesses are a religion. They're a group of believers in the United States, and they believe that you should not have to salute the flag, that you should never, ever, no matter what the flag is, whether it's the United States flag, whether it's the flag of the state of Maine, no matter what it is, Jehovah's Witnesses, you do not believe you should not be saluting it. You should not be doing this. You should not be doing this. You should not acknowledge the flag at all. Okay, you shouldn't be flying the flag in your house, nothing like that. That's what Jehovah's Witnesses believe. It's part of their belief. So in school, in public school back then, they made kids stand up and put their hands over their heart and say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. So that was the state saying that you have to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And the Jehovah's Witnesses obviously don't do that. In fact, it's their religious creed not to do that. So the government said you have to do it. If it doesn't matter if you're Jehovah's Witness or not, you have to say the Pledge of Allegiance every day in the morning. Do you think that went over well with the Jehovah's Witnesses? Anybody? Yes, no? You think they were fine with that?
No.
The Jehovah's Witnesses were not fine with that. So the government saying, you must salute the flag. And the Jehovah's Witnesses said, no, we don't. So there were two little girls in school. Their names were Marie and Gathy Barnett. There's a picture of them. Again, this was back in the 1940s. So they were just little girls, but they were Jehovah's Witnesses. And they absolutely refused to say the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning. They didn't want to do that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. They didn't want to do that in the morning. They said, no, we're not saying that. It's against our religion. And, they basically said, if we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything, right? They brought back that quote. That's what the little girls are saying. And so they got expelled from school. They got kicked out of school. They got bullied and tormented by their peers for not standing up to the Pledge of Allegiance. So did they suffer because of their beliefs? Yes. Were they punished because of their beliefs? Yes. But did they give in? No. These little girls did not give in. They would not, they were their religious convictions were too strong. So it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And this is a good point of digression. We'll take a pause. What is the Supreme Court? Anybody know?
The highest court in the US.
Yes, it's the highest court. So courts are where we go when we have questions or issues in our country. So, if we have a big question that we don't know the answer to, what does the law mean? What does freedom of speech mean? We take it all the way to that big fancy building down in Washington, D.C., the Supreme Court. There are 3 branches of government: the legislative, which is Congress, so it's all the people voting on laws and stuff. You have the executive, which is the president, so Joe Biden, and then you have the judicial, the Supreme Court. And those 3 pieces of government all work together to pass laws and decide what happens in the United States. So that's what the Supreme Court looks like basically today. It's a little different now, but you have 9 old people wearing black robes. Yes, someone has a book. Yes, you are a genius. Read that so you can be a Supreme Court justice one day. So again, it's 9 old people in black robes, and they sit in their very, very nice building, and they talk about the Constitution, and they decide questions, and they go behind a curtain when someone asks them a question, and then they come out with an answer, and they say, yes, you can do that, or no, you cannot do that. So again, we just take the Constitution to them. We ask them a question. Someone said they're not that old. They're not that old. Supreme Court people are very young, spry people. So yeah, that's the Supreme Court. So these 2 little girls went all the way to the Supreme Court with their question. Of course, there was other people with them at this point, but they said, do Americans have to salute the flag? Is that a law in our country? Should that be the way of the United States, where the government is making you salute the flag? And, before we answer that question, I think I have a question. Kyle has something he wants to say. Got it in the chat.
The Jehovah Witnesses come to our house sometimes.
Yes, they do. Yes, the Jehovah's Witnesses often show up at people's houses trying to convert you to become a Jehovah's Witness. That is another thing they do. They're called missionaries. So missionaries are religious people who go around and try to spread the word of their religion. And do they have the right to do that in the United States? Yes.
Yes.
Because we have freedom of religion. So yes, I mean, you can close the door and say no thanks, and that's your right to do that, but they have the right to go around and try to talk to you. So what do you think the Supreme Court told these little girls? What do you think these 9 geniuses told these little girls? Do you think they said that you have to salute the flag? Or you said, no, you're free not to salute the flag? Anybody?
No,
No what?
they don't have to salute the flag.
Yeah, that's what they said. They said students don't have to pledge, have to stand for or salute the flag. It's not, you can't force someone to do that, basically, is what the Supreme Court said. So that's what the Supreme Court looked like back then. Students don't have to stand for the pledge. So did they win their case? Yes. Woo! They don't have to stand for the pledge. It's their religious freedom not to salute the flag. So they won. So let me ask you guys, how did they show courage? How did Marie and Gathy Barnett show courage?
Not stepping up to pledge for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Why was that a courageous act?
Because they didn't, I guess they didn't want to.
Yeah, no, it was against the law. I mean, they broke the law is what they did. And were they bullied for it?
Yes.
Does it take courage to stand up to bullies?
Yeah.
Were they kicked out of school for it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So did they show courage?
Yes.
Yes, they definitely showed courage. I mean, they showed more courage than I've ever showed, and they were like 8 and 10 years old or something like that. So Yeah, they were very courageous. They stood for what they believed, even though they're shunned for it. Susie is 100% correct in the chat. So now let's talk about freedom of speech. And to talk about freedom of speech, I want to introduce you guys to an old Hollywood actress, an old movie star. So we've had movie stars for a while, about 100 years now we've had movie stars. So this woman was an old Hollywood actress named Myrna Loy. You can see a picture of her. She looks very glamorous, right? She's very beautiful. She's very Hollywood starlet, right? So there's Myrna Loy. So let's see what was going on with Myrna Loy. So back in, a couple years ago, we had this thing called the Cold War. And the Cold War was a conflict between the United States and Russia over who was going to basically be the dominant force in the world, whether it was going to be America or Russia, the Soviet Union. So the Cold War was very intense. And although it was a war, the America and Russia itself never went to war, but we were like fighting each other's cultures. We were fighting each other's economic systems. We were battling each other's ideologies. It was basically like a debate for who was going to lead planet Earth in the future, whether it was going to be the USA or the Soviet Union, Russia. So you see Uncle Sam, he's like shaking his fist at the Russian bear who's shaking his fist back. So we were having these conflicts with the Soviet Union, Russia, and you can see the American flag and the Soviet flag there. And so tension was high. People were nervous. They weren't sure what's going to happen. And there was this thing called the House of Un-American Activities. And it was this congressional group that wanted to make sure people in the United States were 100% Americans, that they weren't communists, they weren't Russians, they weren't Soviet supporters, they were 100% Americans. So they would get these people, if you got reported to the House of Un-American Activities, you had to show up to them and they would scrutinize you and they would ask you questions and say, who are you? Where did you come from? Why do you believe that? Have you ever been to Russia? Have you ever had association with the Russian government? Who are you? And a lot of people were going to jail over it. A lot of people were losing their jobs over it. Does this sound like a violation of the First Amendment? Yes. Yes, it does. You literally had the government pulling people from society and saying, listen here, why are you like that? Why do you believe that? That's not a good thing. So yeah, it was a very intense time. People were scared. People were like, oh God, I hope the House of Un-American Activities doesn't call me out. Like I'm a good American. I promise I haven't done anything bad. Because if you got called to the House of Un-American Activities, you knew you were in trouble. You did something wrong that the US government didn't like. So it violated people's right to talk. It violated people's freedom of speech. It violated people's freedom of thought. You had people going to jail just for speaking and thinking things, right? Does that sound good? No, it's not. People were losing their jobs for what they thought or what they were thinking. People were getting ostracized. People were getting kicked out of their community. We're losing their friends. We're losing family members because of what they were thinking and believing. So there was a point where, we were really violating the First Amendment a lot in this country. It's not what the founding fathers wanted. So Myrna Loy, being a Hollywood star, she didn't like what was going on. She was looking around at all this and said, listen, like that's not fair. This shouldn't be happening. And she had a lot of stake in it. She's a film star. She wants to make whatever movies she wants. She wants to star in whatever movie she wants. And she doesn't want the House of Un-American Activities saying, oh, you can't say that. You can't make that movie. You can't do this. So she was a big First Amendment advocate, right? And she basically said, what did she say? If we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything, right? She said, we got to stand up to this. We can't let this keep happening. So she was going out there and she started talking about how awful the House of Un-American Activities was and how that wasn't fair and how people getting in trouble for saying what they think and believe should not be an issue in the United States. And she's founded this thing called the Committee for the First Amendment. And it was a group of her friends that said, we're going to fight for the First Amendment. We're going to fight for freedom of speech. We're going to fight for freedom of assembly. We're going to fight for all this stuff. So she got all her friends together and they started doing protests. You guys see this picture? They're holding signs. They want people to be free. They want people not to go to jail. They're trying to spread the word of what's going on. You see Myrna Loy standing with her friends in Hollywood and they're protesting this House of Un-American Activities. And she got a lot of trouble. Her bosses said, you need to stop. We're not going to put you in movies if you keep this activity up. You need to stop doing that. They're her fans. She's a movie star. She has fans, right? Her fans were like, what are you doing? they're just finding Russians. You need to stop. Like, you need to respect what the government says. She had her other film stars, all of her other movies. Some of her fellow movie stars were saying, Myrna Loy, you need to stop. American Activities is just doing its job. These people are getting punished for a good cause. And of course, the House of Un-American Activities didn't like what she was saying. Obviously, they didn't like what she was saying. So she had all these people coming at her and saying, you need to stop, you need to stop, you need to stop. They were very angry at her, right? But did that stop Myrna Loy? You think that stopped her? Nope, didn't stop her. She even went to Washington, D.C. with all her friends to go talk to the government directly. They flew a plane from California over to Washington, D.C. to go demand for First Amendment freedoms. She even went on the radio. She had this big speech on the radio. She wanted everyone to know about what the House of Un-American Activities was doing and how they were violating the First Amendment. She went on there and she said, we question the right of Congress to ask any man what he thinks on political issues. So she's saying Congress has no place. It's not their job to ask people what they believe. It's not their job to say what we can and can't believe as Americans. So people were seeing, right in the homes of Americans, people were listening to her say this stuff. It was very brave of her. There she is on the radio. And she won. In the end of the day, people like Myrna Loy, they fought the House of Un-Americans successfully. Former President Harry Truman said to the House of Un-American Activities, he said, you're the most un-American thing in America today. So they had the president saying that to the House of Un-American Activities. They were probably like, no, we love America. And Myrna Loy, we can all thank her for fighting this group that was in control. We all have her to thank for this and people like her. So someone tell me how Myrna Loy showed courage through all of that.
By trying to stand up for other people.
Yeah. And did she get in trouble for it?
Yes.
Yeah. Remember we saw the people that were angry at her?
She risked her job.
Yeah, she risked her job for it. She's a movie star. She's got to keep the fans happy. A lot of her fans weren't happy about it. Anything else? Any other reasons why Myrna Loy was courageous? So yeah, so she obviously showed, courage, she stood up for what she believed in. She fought a very powerful institution. She put her job on the line. She put her career on the line. She could have gone to jail for what she was saying. So she showed a lot of courage. So freedom of the press. Let me tell you another story about someone who showed courage. And this one's got a little spooky theme. So maybe you'll see where this is going. So back in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692, long time ago, like 400 years ago or something now, Salem. Anybody know what happened in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692? Anybody?
No.
No, nobody knows?
Witch trials.
Witch trials. Okay, so I'll tell you, don't worry. So Salem, back then, we're talking the Pilgrims, okay? So the dudes on Thanksgiving that wear the hats? That's like this sort of people. Like we're talking the Pilgrims in Massachusetts. So they were living in a town called Salem, which is still there. Salem, Massachusetts. It was a tiny little town back then. And they were going through some rough times. There was famine. People were hungry. They weren't producing enough crops. People were scared that they weren't going to have anything to eat. There was crazy weather. There was things like awful blizzards. People it wasn't comfortable to live. There was a lot of tension in the community. People were upset at each other for one reason or another. There was a lot of arguing going on. And there was constant war going on. They were fighting the Native Americans. There was a lot of fighting going on. So you got bad weather, no food, tension in the community, conflict with the Native Americans. Things aren't going great for Salem, right? Things are pretty intense in Salem. So who do we blame? Who could be the ones behind all of this? There's got to be someone that's really ruining our community. It's witches, right? It's got to be witches. There are witches that put a curse on our community. They're infecting our community. They're going around casting spells on us. They're trying to ruin our paradise here, right? Here in Salem, because they're pilgrims. They're very scared of witches. They believe in witches. They think witches are as real as you and me. Do we think witches are real today? Some people do, most people don't. But back then they were very real. Like there was no way that they weren't real. They were as real as you and me. So people were very scared of witches, and witches had a lot of power in that society. They could cast spells, they could ruin all that stuff. And so they got scared because witches, anybody could be a witch. You could be a witch. I could be a witch. They could be a witch. Anybody could be a witch. So it's scary because your neighbor next door could be a witch. That's kind of terrifying. So people started freaking out about this, and they started holding these trials. Basically, the community was getting together and they would go, oh, I saw Lensa Woodward was a witch. I saw her in the woods, and she was casting spells and standing over a open fire. And they would pull Lensa Woodward in for trial, and they would send her to jail. Or someone would go to the town and say, oh, I saw Jaren McFarland. She was a witch for sure. I saw her casting some spells out of her book. Oh, it was no good. Like, we got to get her in trouble, guys. Like, we got to send her to jail, or she's just going to continue to do this. So people were just calling each other out left and right. And were any of them actually witches? No, none of them were actually witches. People were just getting really freaked out and really scared, and were blaming everyone for witchcraft. And it was basically whoever the community turned on. So if they didn't like you, all these people would start pointing at you and saying, you're a witch, you're a witch, you're a witch. And once you were brought in front of the trials, they would ask you all these questions where they basically assumed you're a witch already, and then they would just ask you questions to prove their point. And if they didn't like your answer, they would just keep asking until you gave the answer they wanted. And if you were in trouble, you had to go to jail, and some people were even killed over this. Because back then, they killed witches. So if you were found out to be a witch, there was a pretty good chance that you might die. So they were killing witches. And even here in Maine, one of the victims of the Salem witch trials was from Maine. He was from Wells, Maine, and he got dragged all the way back from Wells, Maine to Salem and got put on trial. So it all went out of control. A lot of people ended up in prison. A lot of people died. And the only reason it stopped is because the governor at the time, his name was William Phipps, someone accused his wife of being a witch. And once someone accused his wife of being a witch, he said, okay, stop this. This has gone too far. This is out of control. And so the governor said, stop the trials, end this, no more witches. And so it only stopped because someone accused the governor's wife. That's how crazy it got, though, that someone accused the governor's wife. So he was very angry about it. He said, this went out of hand. You guys went a little too crazy about this. And it was really awkward because the community had gotten so crazy that they accused the governor's wife of being a witch. I mean, that takes a lot of like you got to be really out of control to start like pointing your finger at like the governor, right? And his family. So he was mad. He realized how embarrassing it was. So he made a decree that said, you know what, we're not going to talk about the witch trials anymore. We're just going to pretend like it never happened. No one's going to write books about this. If you write a book about this, if you write a pamphlet, you're just going to go to jail. We're not going to talk about the witch trials. We're going to forget they ever happened, and we're just going to move on because this was really embarrassing because things got way out of hand. And then this guy, he said, oh, yes, we will. He said, we will talk about that. Now, who was this man? His name is Thomas Mall. And if you're wondering why he's the Quaker Oats guy, is because we don't have any pictures of him, but he was a Quaker. A Quaker is another religious group, sort of like Jehovah's Witnesses. It's another religious group. And because he was a Quaker, he believed you had to be able to speak your mind all the time, that the government couldn't put restrictions on it. And at first, he did believe in witches. But then as the trials were happening, he said, you know what, this witch stuff is really dumb and it's probably not true. And so he stopped believing in witches. And he said, if we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything. And so when the governor said that you can't publish anything about the witch trials, he said, I will. And so he started writing a book and he published it. It was called Truth Held Forth and Maintained. So he published this book about the Salem witch trials when the governor said not to. When the governor said you would go to jail if you wrote anything. So did he get arrested for this? Yes, he got arrested. And he wrote in his book, if it were better that 100 witches should live than one person be put to death for a witch which is not a witch. So he basically said one person who wasn't a witch that got killed was too many. So he went to jail. The governor said, oh, well, he broke my law. He published about the witch trials. So he went to jail. He went on trial. And, you know, he had a lawyer and everything. So he's on trial and he was acquitted. So he didn't go to jail. The judge actually said, you know what, you have freedom of the press. You're allowed to publish whatever you want. And so he was acquitted. But he still had, and you know, the whole trial was one of the, what Thomas More did helped shape the First Amendment. When the founding fathers remembered this story, that's why one of the reasons they included freedom of the press in the First Amendment. So throughout his life, he continued criticizing and writing about the government. And he was imprisoned 5 times for it. He was whipped publicly 3 times for writing about the government. And he was fined by the government 3 times. So did he get in trouble a lot? Yes. So how did Thomas More show courage?
By not giving up.
Yeah, for not giving up. I mean, what did he do? Did he break the law?
Yes.
Yes. Did he get in trouble for it?
Yes. He stood up for
what-
what he believed in.
Yeah. And was what he did very important though? Yes, he realized that a very awful thing had happened in his community, that a very unfair and wrong thing has happened, and people weren't allowed to talk about it. And he said, you know what? I don't care how much trouble it gets me. I'm going to talk about it. Like, we're going to open up about this. We're going to talk about how innocent people died because of our community. So did that require a lot of bravery? Yes, he showed a lot of courage. So he's a very important guy. I mean, he helped found, freedom of the press in the United States. Founding fathers were thinking about him. So our last one, freedom of assembly. So we're going to talk about a little bit about someone who showed courage with freedom of assembly. So back, a couple of years ago, we had these things in the United States called Jim Crow laws and segregation. And does anybody know what this is? Has anybody seen this before? Yeah, so, white people and black people couldn't use the same bathrooms. They couldn't sit in the same spaces. They couldn't use the same drinking fountains. They had to sit in separate places in class, and they had to go to different schools and stuff like that. Does that sound fair? No. So we had this thing called the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement happened in the 1950s and 60s, and it was led by people you may have heard of, like Martin Luther King. And they basically fought against these laws. They fought against segregation. They fought against Jim Crow laws. They fought for equal rights. They did it through marching, through giving speeches, through voting, to taking bus rides, to going places, to holding signs and doing all these things to fight these laws that were not fair, that were unequal and hurting people. And then I want to introduce you to this guy, John Lewis. He was one of those people. He was one of the civil rights activists. So he was fighting against segregation. He was fighting against Jim Crow. He was fighting against inequality. And John Lewis said, if we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything. So he identified a problem in his community, and he became the leader of this thing called the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee. I know that's a big word. It's a very complicated thing. It's called the SNCC. And basically, it was a group that fought for civil rights that John Lewis was the leader of, the SNSCC. People are saying Rosa Parks, Malcolm X. Yes, all of those people were involved in the civil rights movement, 100%. John Lewis is just one of them. So there's a state called Alabama, and they were not letting black people vote. Does that sound democratic? Does that sound good? No. So John Lewis decided, you know what, we're gonna have a protest. We're gonna have a march. We're going to march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama, and we're going to protest these voting laws. And so here he is. He's the guy in the little rain jacket, the light rain jacket on the right. And that's him leading the march. They're going to go all the way from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama. It's a long walk. It's a bit of a walk. But they're going to do this. They're going to hold their signs. They're going to sing songs, and they're going to protest these voting laws. And if you need a reference on where the state of Alabama is, it's the red one on that map. So it's way down south. So there they are marching, marching across a bridge. John Lewis is leading them. And then they run into the police.
Yep, that's what
today. Were on orders from the governor of Alabama to not let the marchers pass. Does that sound like a violation of the First Amendment?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So you can see the police confronting, you see John Lewis standing there, you see the police coming in. The police started attacking them. They started firing tear gas into the crowd and started hitting people with clubs and started sending them backwards. Now, was John Lewis and his friends, were they being violent? No, they were just
fall
marching
out?
from Selma to Montgomery. They were going on a very large walk in a giant crowd, but the police started attacking them. John Lewis got hit really bad in the head. In fact, he carried a scar on his forehead from getting hit by a club for the rest of his life. So the police, you can see the gas, you can see the people going crazy. It was really violent. People were calling this Bloody Sunday. It's a really awful thing. But did that stop them?
No.
No, they came back. And this time people like Martin Luther King joined in. So it actually didn't work. I mean, the police attacking the protesters had the opposite effect. It made the protesters more angry. It got more people involved. So all of these people from all around the country, including places like Maine, came all the way to Alabama to help do the second march and the third march. And they kept doing it until they walked all the way to Selma. They did it. I mean, they walked all the way from Selma to Montgomery. It took them 3 tries, but they didn't. You can see Martin Luther King. He's the guy in the blue shirt with the white hat. He's walking in front. So they did this very long walk, got their cardio in, got all the way to Montgomery. And because of that, because of the publicity this got and because this was so important, the president at the time, Lyndon B. Johnson, he signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So because of all of this, they passed this major law that helped support voting rights in our country. So how did John Lewis show courage? Anybody? Can someone tell me how he showed courage?
He stood up for his people.
Stood up for what was right. Yeah. How did he do that? Did he get attacked for it?
Yep.
Did he get physically beaten?
Yes.
But did he do the right thing?
Yes.
Yes, he fought for a good cause at the end of the day, but he literally risked his life. I mean, all of these people have risked their life to some degree, but like he definitely got like hit in the head because of what he believed. So those are some examples of people who use their First Amendment freedoms courageously. And, something for you to think about, we're talking about, oh yeah, he did not give up. We're talking about all these people from history, but, a lot of history is unwritten. The future is totally unwritten. So how are you going to use your First Amendment freedoms courageously? What are you going to fight for in this world? How are you going to use your First Amendment? What is going to be the causes that you stand up for? Are things that you should be asking yourself every day, right? How are we going to make a better country, a better society, a better culture for everybody, including yourself, right? So that's all I have. I just want to thank you guys for letting me talk and humoring me and being a good crowd and responding, and hope you guys learned something and got something out of this. We are open as a museum, so stop by and see us. And, check out our website. We have tons of stuff available on our website right there for homeschool groups, for all sorts of resources you can use. And again, there's only going to be more of that coming. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have or hear any comments that you want to tell me. Again, I want to thank you guys for taking part in this and hosting me and having me. And I hope you guys have us back.
Thank you so much, Max. Does anyone have a question? I don't want to cut anyone off. We really appreciate the work that you put into this. And the slides are great. We really enjoyed it.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed them. Like I said, try to keep them somewhat fun. So
yes, very interactive. People appreciate that. It's wonderful.
Great.
Wonderful, wonderful.
All right. Thank you guys so much. This was awesome. Oh, thank you, Brandy Shunk. Yeah, thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so next we have the Maine State Museum here with us. We have Joanna Turow, who's the chief educator at the Maine State Museum, and also Kate Weber, who's the lead educator at the Maine State Museum. And they've put together a program for us about acts of courage from people in our state throughout time. And we'll also find out more about the Maine State Museum's resources that we can use for homeschooling families. And again, I would encourage you to visit the Maine State Museum's website. They have a capital scavenger hunt there which is a really fun thing to do as a family, and other things to do. So I would encourage you to visit Maine State Museum's website. And hello, Joanna and Kate. It's all yours.
Oh, you're muted. Thank you so much. I'm sorry about that. So thank you for inviting us. We're really happy to be here today. We hope that you've been having a wonderful Capitol Day virtually and enjoying all the presentations that you've seen so far. Hopefully this will be a good one as well for you. As Angela said, I'm the chief educator here at the Maine State Museum. Kate is joining me. She's a lead educator that is going to help monitor the chat. And I really want to encourage everybody to ask questions, make comments. We really want to hear from you as we go through our program today. So I thought that you guys, some of you might have been to the museum before. The museum is closed right now, which is kind of sad. We've had some building issues, and so we've had to make a lot of repairs. So the museum's not going to be open for a while, but we do have a website, as Angela had mentioned, full of all kinds of good stuff for you. So we'll highlight some of those, and you'll get a glimpse of that today. We're also going to highlight some of the objects that we have in our collections that you might be interested in, and some of our exhibits that you could see also online as well. So before we dive in deep, can maybe we get a show of hands, or you can use your human hand to wave, or your robot hand that Zoom provides as a response, and tell me if you've been to the museum before. Let's see, we definitely have some hands raised. Okay, I see a thumbs up. That's wonderful. Wonderful. Looks like we have a good mixture of people who might be unfamiliar with some of the materials that we have, and familiar and have maybe actually got a chance to come inside and see things before we closed. So that's really wonderful. So some of this might be familiar to you as we go along. Okay, so let me start and share my screen, if that is okay, when we can get going here. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that nice and bright. Okay, we're going to be talking about acts of courage throughout Maine history, and it's really going to kind of mirror some of the resources and teaching materials that we have for you. And so we are going to talk about a bunch of different types of courage. And this is something I've really given a lot of thought for. When I heard that the theme for today was going to be courage, I really had to take a little time and do some research. Courage and bravery is a really broad topic. And I learned that there's a lot of different ways that you can be courageous. And typically, I think of courageous, and I think a lot of people think of courageous as physical bravery. And I learned that there's a lot more to it. And as I looked, of course, to history for examples, I found that there are all sorts of stories, like you might have heard from the First Amendment Museum, of people who chose to speak out against injustices, and often at great personal risk. And then there's also people like inventors and entrepreneurs who risked ridicule for their ideas, or financial ruin when they chose to follow their dreams, some of which produce products that we're very thankful to have today, like electricity. So those are another type of courage. Of course, they're just everyday people, right? Everyday people perform acts of courage in sometimes just getting through a difficult moment or a challenging moment in their lives, and surviving that can be just a form of courage as well. But I had to limit our choices of different types of courage today, because of course we just have an hour or so to be with each other, and I could go on and on. So we chose to talk about feeling fear, yet choosing to act, persevering in the face of adversity, standing up for what is right, and exploring the unknown. Okay. So I know that you all have been talking about courage probably all morning, And maybe you could share with us a moment when you have been courageous, or somebody close to you has been courageous. And I thought that it would be really great if we took a moment and shared a story with each other. If you're comfortable, if you're not, that's fine too. But if you're comfortable, share a story of when you have been courageous. And we'll give you some time in the chat to put that down. And Kate will take a note of that, and then we'll get back to it in a minute or two and review those and see what people have shared with us. To get things started, I thought I'd share one of my personal moments of courage. I had to think about it, but I went back to when I was 10 years old. I was in elementary school, and I was riding the school bus back and forth, right, from home and school. And there were two boys, big boys, that were bullies, and they were in the back of the bus. I sat there every single time. And so all of us younger kids in the bus didn't want to sit in front of them and be tormented with their teasing. So that meant that every once in a while, somebody had to sit there. And if you didn't get to the bus on time, you would be left with that seat. And I would also travel with my younger brother, Justin, and my neighbor and a friend who was also younger than I was. And so the one day that we had to sit in front of these two boys, I was okay with the teasing, but I was really upset that my younger brother and my younger friend were getting teased, and they were getting their hair pulled, and they were really being teased about their hair. Because my brother had an amazing kind of mop of curly hair. Everybody was jealous of his hair, really pretty hair for a boy. And my friend Tina, whose hair was long and blonde, really almost white. Her hair was so light blonde, and they were teasing and pulling on her pigtails. And so I decided I was going to do something, and I grabbed for their arm as they tried to pull the hair, and I caught it, which was a shock. I didn't expect to catch their hand. And of course they were shocked too, and they stopped. And I told them they were being mean, and I told them that they needed to stop. And at least for that, they did. So that is my personal act of courage at age 10. Okay, so maybe we can be courageous today and share our stories.
All right, thank you, Joanna. Yeah, we've got some messages in the chat about going up, and if you're afraid of the dark, what it might feel like to go upstairs. We have messages about having your own beliefs and sharing them with people, and that people might not understand them and they might attack them. We've got some physical bravery from a wisdom tooth, which I did not enjoy myself when I had that happen. And some more stories about bullying, standing up to a boss. So adults face these things too.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, and I noticed that Lensa has a hand raised. I don't know if we're able to do actual voice things here. Would you prefer that we just have the chat box, Joanna?
Voice is fine, or is that left over from last time?
Oh, it went down.
It went down. Okay, there. That solves that.
That might be. I'm trying to scan through the faces to see if I'm missing any hands up or anything else. But it looks like those are the stories of bravery we have so far. I was remembering one of kind of fear yet choosing to act, in the time that I was with my cousin in this hayloft in a barn, and we heard this terrible growling noise coming out of the darkness. And we had to decide, you know, I was older than my cousin, so I thought, well, it's my job to make sure she's safe. So I led the way, and we got out of the barn, and we kept thinking we were going to get attacked by a monster, and it turned out it was my father who was making a scary noise outside the barn just to scare us. So it turns out I didn't even need to be brave about it, and I was so mad at him. But
and you still remember it today.
I do, yeah. Yeah, I remind him of that all the time.
Well, thank you all of you for sharing. That's wonderful. I thought now we would go next to feeling fear without yet choosing to act. And specifically, we're going to talk about Mainers in the Civil War. Okay, Maine had a big role in the Civil War, and there were, we sent troops to help save the Union and end slavery. So we contributed more than 70,000 troops. That's a lot of people. And national leaders such as Vice President Hannibal Hamlin. It's always a hard one to say. And then Brigadier General Joshua L. Chamberlain. And it's Chamberlain that I wanted to take a closer look at with you today. And we're going to see he's right there in this early photograph. Chamberlain started out as a professor actually at Bowdoin College. At the outbreak of the war, he served, he offered his services to the governor. He really felt strongly that this was a cause that he wanted to fight for. So the governor made him Lieutenant Colonel of the 20th Maine Voluntary Infantry. And the flag that we have in the slide here is the 20th Maine flag that was from from the Battle of Gettysburg that is in the museum. It's one of our prized possessions. It's really big and it has been conserved because you can see here that it's been through a lot and it's not all in it's not complete, but we've preserved it for what it is. Okay, so Chamberlain is most famous for his actions in the Battle of Gettysburg, where he directed his regiment's defense of the left flank of the Union Army as they attempted to defend and counter against really aggressive attacks by the Confederates. And this is happening on the afternoon of July 2nd, 1863. Now, his regiment is out of ammunition. So he ordered his volunteers to fix bayonets. So what that means, and you can see that's part of our quote here on the screen, fixed bayonets is their rifles had kind of like a piece that came out and acted like a knife. So this was going to end up being hand-to-hand combat, which is pretty scary. So they charged down the hill, knowing that they did not have anything but these bayonets, and they actually repelled the attack. I think they were probably so scary when they did that, that they actually ended up capturing many Confederate soldiers. So that is one of the most famous acts of bravery and courage that Chamberlain is known for, but he actually continues to be a prominent figure in Maine history for the rest of his life. In fact, he was governor for 4 different terms. So he is a good example of kind of that traditional bravery that we see in movies and films. But it isn't just these famous people that are brave, right? We have the everyday soldier. And I wanted to show you this picture, which is from our collection. This is drummer boy Daniel Webster Marston of Philip, Maine. And he was just 13 years old in the summer of 1861 when he and his father both together enlisted in the 9th Regiment of the Maine Infantry. Okay, so Daniel, because both his father and him are named Daniel, Daniel was referred to as Danny. So we'll refer to him as Danny so we won't get confused. Because it gets hard when you're both the father and son have the same name. So Daniel Marston Sr., the father, was promoted to captain of the 16th Maine, while Danny remained in the 9th Maine. And over the year, his father, Captain Marston, tried to arrange for his son's transfer to the 16th Maine. Okay, and one of the letters that he wrote trying to arrange that him and his son could be reunited was, "I respectfully desire the transfer of my son, Daniel W. Marston, for reasons that he is my only son and is away from his friends and acquaintances. He is young, being only 14 years of age and a drummer boy." Can you imagine going to war when you're just 14 years old? I bet some of you out here are 14 years old or 13 years old when he joined the Union Army. I think it probably felt a little bit safer when he was with his father, so it must have been a scary year while he was separated. So the story does have a good ending, that even though his father had some difficulty getting reunited with his son, he was able to pull some strings with some important people that he knew, luckily. And he received notice that Danny was going to be transferred in June of 1863. Now, this timing isn't great because that's just 2 weeks before the 16th Maine was overrun at the Battle of Gettysburg that we were just talking about when we were talking about Joshua Chamberlain. So unlike Joshua Chamberlain's 20th Maine that actually kind of succeeded in capturing Confederate soldiers, then the 16th Maine was overrun and most of them were taking prisoners of war. So it was pretty lucky, actually, that Danny was in the 9th Maine, and the 9th Maine at the time was over in South Carolina. And so logistics prevented Danny from quickly joining his father. And so he was actually spared the horrors of that battle and captivity as a prisoner of war. But at the close of the war, both Captain Marston and Danny returned to their family. And you can see I have a quote here from Danny's mother. So we have lots of letters from both Danny and his father, as well as his mother, who was writing to him throughout the war, which is a really nice peek into a family in the 1860s going through a really difficult moment in time. So that's just an example of everyday people in history also stepping up and being brave. And you might think that Danny as a drummer boy wasn't the most important part of the infantry at that point, right? Would it be the soldiers with the guns? But that's not true at all. Drummer boys served a really important role. Drummer boys and the musicians were forms of communication. And remember, this is 1860s. There's no radios, there's no cell phones, certainly not a lot of technology. So if the troops were going to be told by the general to advance, they needed somehow to do that. And often that was done through music and bugle calls and drumming. So he did have a pretty important role in the battle. Okay, so what's going on during the Civil War at home? Okay, so we have a Civil War quilt to show you. So of course, soldiers were not the only ones that were demonstrating courage during the Civil War. Families were left behind, and they were able to show courage just by surviving and taking care of family farms and businesses and contributing to the war effort in any way they could. So in 1864, this quilt was made, the one that we're seeing here, and I have some detailed shots of it for you to look at. And this was made in 1864 when the war was already 3 years old. So thousands of Maine soldiers had died in battle, had been wounded or stricken with disease. And there was a group of people, mostly women, called the Sanitary Commission. It's called that, it's kind of a funny name. But it's called that because they really were promoting sanitary conditions in a hospital so that the hospitals were better run and safer. And they had women and other organizations make quilts. And this would give comfort and warmth to the soldiers who were sick and needed that, that show of support, really. Okay, so that is a little peek at some of our Civil War collections here at the Maine State Museum. And if you do want to learn a little bit more, we have some of our objects on display. And we also have all of our Civil War exhibits, or almost all of them, all of our Civil War letters, like the one we heard from Daniel Marston's mother, that are transcribed so you can read them. So sometimes those older letters are really hard to read because they're in fancy handwriting, but these are typed up in and pretty easy to translate. Okay, we have lots of other things to show you.
And before you move to the next section, Joanne, I just wanted to point out we got another tale of courage in here from Lensa about battling Lyme. So I wanted to put that in too.
Yeah, that's a really tricky disease. I know it's really hard to diagnose and can be quite difficult to live through. I have a relative that has Lyme's disease as well. So commiserations, a lot of bravery there. Okay, our next type of courage, persevering in the face of adversity. Okay, and we're going to take a look at pandemics throughout Maine's history, and that's pretty apt right now, of course. We, in the last year or so, have endured a lot of difficult circumstances as we face the global pandemic that has kind of shut down our country and our world in a sense. But COVID-19 is not the first disease to change Mainers' lives. Our pandemic primary source set, which has lots and lots and lots of information for you, help learners of all different ages kind of investigate pandemics like smallpox, tuberculosis, polio through different objects and photographs. So we can, if you were to go onto our website, which we have right here, which I think we can click on, maybe not. Try that again. Oops, maybe not. But oops, and I went forward more than I expected. Okay, but if you go onto our website, we have this wonderful section that's all about pandemics. And those pandemics have different sources, what we're calling primary sources. So that could be a photograph, that could be an object, very much like the ones that we've seen here. So this is a little booklet during the 19th century when influenza was raging throughout the country. This is a picture from a sanitarium where women were recovering, hopefully, from tuberculosis. And then, of course, a smallpox vaccination, which is actually in our collection, but it has been irradiated, so it's no longer active, so it's safe. So these are just a sampling of those. So if you really want to learn more about how disease has affected Maine's history, this is a good source to go to. Okay, and another way that we preserve, another example of preserving in the face of adversity is Malaga Island. And Malaga Island, Fragmented Lives, is an exhibit that we had at the museum a while back, but we found that people are really interested in the lives of these islanders. And well, I think that they're also fascinated and saddened by the tragedy that they suffered. So Malaga Island is a mixed race community, and it's an island off of Phippsburg, Maine, and they were evicted from their homes by the state of Maine in 1912. And until recently, the story of this community was relatively unknown to most people. It was kind of shamefully hidden away. And the University of Maine, Southern Maine, did an archaeological dig. All of those objects came to the museum. And so they were unearthed, and they really painted a picture of what these people's lives were like. And they were pretty much like everybody else. So they were not wealthy, of course. They were poor, but they worked as fishermen, laundry women, carpenters. They took care of their neighbors and relatives to get by in hard times. So the only crime they had against them was really that they looked different than everybody else. And they were different mostly because of the color of their skin. But what really makes this a courageous act is that these people were forced off their home. They had struggled to find a place to go, but they survived and they carried on. And they have survivors and descendants, so people who are related to them today. And they are successful. They are teachers, they are musicians, and they are really proud of their heritage. So we have 5 different lesson plans that allows you to explore different aspects of this exhibit. If you're interested in learning more about this community, it's all on the Maine State Museum's website. Okay, so standing up for what's right. I bet some of you have done that before, right? That you might have a different belief. I know that somebody shared a story of courage, saying that they have stood up for a belief, or just let other people know that they have beliefs, even though may not be the same as others. And this happened in Maine and across the nation, actually, when women were petitioning to be able to vote. And it took a really, really long time for women to be able to go to the polls and cast a ballot. Okay, so we recently, before the museum shut down, we had an exhibit all about what it took, this whole long journey of what it took for Maine women to be able to earn the vote. Because when we became a state in 1820, it was written to the Constitution that men were going to vote, which is unfortunate that half the population got left out. But these women were passionate and truly courageous. They stood up for what they believed in and really had to fight to make their voices heard. It took them 100 years of petitioning, lecturing, debating, and protesting and marching to earn the right to vote. It was a long journey that took perseverance and passion for many, many generations of women. And the museum has many lesson plans, actually, 3 lesson plans that will allow anybody who wants to explore this fight a little bit more. And I kind of highlighted one of them here because it's so much fun. And I know, Kate, that you were very much involved in putting this together. And you got to know Lou Rogers quite well. And Lou Rogers drew the cartoon that we see over here. Maybe you can see my part. She's on the one right over here with the woman in chains. And it looks kind of similar to the one that we have over here that was drawn by Harry Peter, who is the creator of Wonder Woman. Do you guys know Wonder Woman? Yeah, I see some heads nodding. So Harry Peter was the desk. He worked at the same magazine and called Judge, and Harry Peter and Lou Rogers, their desks were kind of side by side, and we don't know for sure that he was taking inspiration from Lou Rogers, but I think we can see enough kind of similarities between these two that we can kind of guess that maybe he was inspired by Lou Rogers and influenced by the women's suffrage campaign, because a lot of the other symbolism that the campaign used was chains and ropes and breaking out of them, and freeing themselves from domination of men without the freedom to vote their own ways. Kate, did you want to say anything else about these lessons?
Oh, well, I think that this is a fun one because I love cartoons personally, so that's always great. And I love that Lou Rogers is also a courageous figure, because at the time when she was making political cartoons, that wasn't something that women did. No one thought that women were funny. You know, they thought that women just dealt with stuff in the house and the home. But she grew up in Maine. She moved to New York City. She made a living for herself as an artist. So that's one part that's really nice. But I also like this lesson because it teaches us a little bit too about how to be really careful about the images that we see. And you can kind of learn to read images and think, okay, well, I can see this. What is someone trying to get me to believe when I look at an image? So it kind of teaches you to be to look more closely at what's behind the images we see, which is a really great skill to have just as you go forward into the world. But that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you for adding all of that. Okay, so again, these resources can be found on our website, mainestatemuseum.org, and it's all under our Learn section. And so that's the address for that. So we're moving on to our one of our last freedom, our last types of courage, exploring the unknown. And traveling through Maine 200 years ago, we recently had a bicentennial exhibit. Unfortunately, it got cut short because of COVID and the museum shutting down. So we didn't have quite the same celebration that we had hoped to have. And one of the things that we had created for that is an interactive map. This was a map that was created by Joseph Treat, and I will forward the slide. This is kind of a fuzzy picture of him right now. And of course, I bet this is not something that's this type of bravery is something we all kind of experience. It is kind of scary if you go out into the wilderness, right? It goes out to a place that's unknown to you, going out to moving beyond the familiar boundaries. And when Maine became a state, and they didn't know a lot of the land, it was 1820. The coastline was more well known, but the inner northern sections were very much unmapped and unexplored by the most recent settlers. But it was well known by the Wabanaki. And so the government of Maine, the newly formed government, decided that they would have an expedition to Maine, and they would be able to explore these lands, and they were to create a map, and they were to kind of document different resources like timber, and they had the help of Wabanaki guides. And this is Joseph Neptune that we have displayed here. He was a leader, a Penobscot leader, and he joined the expedition. So they headed off on September 26th, and they would travel actually 500 miles by foot and canoe. And it wasn't easy because they're going in November, and December, and it's getting colder. So starting off in the end of September maybe wasn't exactly ideal. And that's why I wanted to kind of share this quote for you. And I kind of shortened it a little bit, but it's just to show you that they were really going through a lot of hardships. So they're heading kind of home this way. And this is November 17th. And they're saying, we embark and proceed down rivers 2 miles and find the river full of ice. We break through a bar of ice and go by water about a half a mile when we meet strong ice across the river. So they only got a little ways before the ice kind of closed in on them. We haul our canoe on the ice about 2 miles in hopes of the open river. There's a river open below, but are disappointed and leave our canoe on the east side about a half a mile below. We then proceed carrying our baggage about 3 miles and camp with heavy hearts and light suppers. And what they're referring to here with about light supper is that they're running out of food. So this is an amazing journey, and we've created this interactive map. So you can go onto our website and you can click on one of the different stops, and you will be able to get a few sentences about what's going on there. And then you can actually read a transcription or see the map drawings that were done by Joseph Treat. And I thought that if I clicked over here that I could get us to go there, and maybe we can explore it just for a second ourselves. Let's see if this is going to work. We'll kind of cross our fingers for a moment. Sometimes it's a little slow when you do it through Zoom. Okay, so if you were to go look at this on your own, this is what you would see.
Oh, and Joanna, we're still on your PowerPoint, so you might have to swap your screen share over to your internet browser.
Oh, thank you, Kate.
You're welcome.
So stop that share, and we'll move over to the internet. And does it look better? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. So this is what you would see, not my PowerPoint, if you were to go to our website and wanted to explore this. And of course, you can click right here, and it should take us to the next page. And so hoping that you guys, it's probably a little delayed at your end. This is just such a cool tool that I really wanted to show you how it worked. And I'm going to click on one of these, And you can see you can move around the map and it will zoom in, and it's a little bit different map than we experience today. So it's kind of cool to compare what it looks like today and what it looked like 1820s, because of course we've got better map making skills now. We can fly planes over the country and really get a good look at it. And if we wanted to see our journal entry, we can click on that and it will bring up a window which gives us a little description, but we get a close look at all their drawings. I love seeing how they interpreted the landscape. And they're making notes about, you know, what is there lumber nearby, how thick and thin is the river gets, is it how much land they travel. They moved pretty quickly. Then there's the journal page. Usually each drawing a map has a page that corresponds to it that tells you what they did that day. You can see that they're talking about passing up the Aroostook, and that they see logs and excellent pine timber. So these are the types of resources that they want to document, because they're pretty important to the state of Maine. Of course, we're a big lumbering state. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this one and we'll go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, just a second. Thanks guys for waiting through that kind of technical glitches. And then I have one more exploring the unknown to share with you. And that's called Soaring Imagination. So that gives you a clue about what the topic is, right? And I have another clue for you as well. Okay, so maybe some of you like to make paper airplanes. If we go back in time to when flight was just brand new, I mean, today we take airplanes everywhere. We're used to them taking off. We're used to seeing them in the sky, but it wasn't too long ago that that was pretty rare. If birds can glide for long periods, then why can't I? That sounds like a reasonable question, right? That's Orville Wright. And on December 17th, 1903, the Wright brothers became the first humans to fly in a plane that was heavier than air, and that just kind of triggered public imagination. So you can imagine that there were all sorts of kids thinking of how can they make a glider, or can they make a model plane. And so in 1911, 17-year-old Harold Cooper of Auburn, Maine, took that a step farther. He wasn't just satisfied with models or paper airplanes, and he built a full-size glider that actually flew. Now, unfortunately, he was too heavy to fly his glider. So he needed to find somebody else that could do this. And this is like a glider that he made out of just like things he could find. So we have, you know, cotton sheeting, piano wire, you know, pine wood. So there was a little risk to flying this, this plane, but he convinced 11-year-old Philip Tarr to be the pilot. And so in the summer of 1912, with Tarr kind of hanging on with his elbows, the glider flew 100 feet, about as high as 30 feet in the air. And from what I was, I think the newspaper articles at the time say they kind of had to like kind of do a running start, and they were at like a cliff, and so they went off the cliff and sent Philip Tarr out into the air. And luckily he came back in one piece. So this is just one of these really fun pieces that we have in Maine history. Certainly not your heroic figures, but this I think is just as fun. And so I wanted to kind of fit it into ours, our presentation. And we actually have on our website a whole bunch of different paper airplane patterns that you can make if you're really ambitious. Some of these are actually a little challenging. And this one that I have up here is for a stunt plane. and you can race them. We've actually done that in the museum. When we were open, we have a big atrium, and we had people see how far they can fly their homemade planes, and that was pretty popular. And we have a video online as well. If you need some help, you can watch our YouTube video about how to do the instructions on paper airplanes. Okay, so guys, that's where you can find that. And we've kind of gone through all 4 types of courage that we have really good examples of in the museum. So just as a reminder, we talked about feeling fear and choosing to act, persevering in the face of adversity or challenges, and standing up for what is right, standing up for your beliefs, and then of course exploring the unknown, because explorers need to be brave people, because who knows if they'll come home. Luckily, all the ones that we know have. So if you guys have want to talk to us about any of these materials, Kate and I are available. We are starting to do virtual Zoom programming if you're interested in any of that. Our emails are here. And if you just want to go to the museum website and check out any of the materials that we have, we've got the website here as well. And this is just a sampling of those. There are even more things on there. So if you're looking for something fun to do, we have scavenger hunts, we have games, and we have also some online exhibits that you can explore. So there's lots there to help you explore Maine history and some of our natural history collections as well, and our archaeology collections. And so we really thank you for having us, and hopefully you'll enjoy those materials. This is a great chance for us to kind of pause. Kate, if you have things that you think I forgot, that's a good time to add those. And if anybody has questions, comments, something that you want to know about the Maine State Museum's collection, and you just haven't had a chance to ask, this is that time. We can answer anything that you would like, or we could try to at least.
Yeah, well, we do have, there was a lot of excitement in the chat about the story of flying your own glider. I don't think I would want to be anywhere near that or watching it happen. I'd be so nervous. But Brandy actually sent us a good question about a link to the website. So the first link that I just put up there, mainstatemuseum.org/learn, is where you can find everything we just talked about if you sort through. But to give a little bit of a pointer, the glider activity is one of our activities and family fun section thing. So I included a link to that as well. But I'd encourage you to explore through there, because there's a lot of great stuff on different topics. Okay, there's a question here from Lensa, where are you? So the museum is in Augusta, but I'm at home right now in Sabattis with Clove the dog.
Yeah, the museum staff is sort of scattered right now because of the building issues. I'm here. We're going to get kicked out of here this summer, most likely, or this fall, so that they're planning the work that they're doing to repair things, but it's not, and they're taking down exhibits. So that's a big job, making sure objects are safe. And most of us in the meantime are working at home. Anybody else have any more questions, comments? Want to tell us your favorite thing that you saw at the museum? If you guys are missing the museum, those of you who've been, or you're curious, those of you who haven't been, we do have some little videos up we're calling Museum Moments about just a few favorite things. Like, I know people, the animals. We have one of the fish, the live fish that we used to have. And so a few of the animals are in there too.
I'm going to put that Museum Moments link in the chat too. So these are all videos, and they're usually about 3 or 5 minute videos. You can see some of your favorite parts of the museum that you've been missing.
Well, thank you, everybody. You have our contact information. If you think of a last minute question or comment, or you want to know something from us or just say hi, feel free to reach out. We're missing people. We're missing our visitors, students. So we love to hear from you. And thank you so much for giving us some of your time. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Joanna and Kate, for being here. It was great to see all of the resources that the Maine State Museum has and hear some stories about courage. We're very grateful for that. Thank you. And we're doing one last thing for Capitol Day. And so before we get to that, I'd like to just thank everyone for being here and celebrating with us. Celebrating homeschooling and our state and our freedoms and courage. Just want to remember to check out the website for homeschoolers of Maine all this week for Home Education Week. We have activities going on that you could check out, and we also are running the used curriculum sale. Lots of stuff there that I'm sure you would love to check out. So I'd encourage you to do that. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors for this event, the McFarland family, the Story family, Royal Fireworks Press, Hydroterra Ocean Education Center, the Old Schoolhouse, Knotgrass History, and Generation Joshua. And again, they're all on the website if you want to check them out. And so to end our rally today, we will recognize our junior legislators. And each of our junior legislators, homeschoolers, completed the junior legislator unit study. And this was quite an in-depth study about the branches of government, how a bill becomes a law, the Bill of Rights, our national anthem and flag. Everything was in here. It was quite in depth. So I am really proud of all the kiddos that completed this. This was quite the challenge. So homeschoolers of Maine, we are very, very proud of you. You will receive your badges and your certificates in the mail. So be on the lookout for that coming to you in the mail. And so again, thank you all for coming and celebrating with us today. And we will celebrate the achievements of our junior legislators at this point. Thank you so much, everyone.